is a reggae night. This is a reggae beat. This is a reggae night. This is a reggae beat. It's a reggae night. This is a reggae. Hello, welcome to this edition of the interview series. And we are very grateful to you all for coming, and more so to Professor Ogunyemi, the president of ASUU, who has agreed to take so many questions from first interviewers, students, media personalities, two professors and members of the audience. We appreciate all of you. We know it's during the Ramadans. Those of you who are fasting is an additional sacrifice, but it's also an additional barakah. Without much ado, let me start by calling on the first person, Daniel Eworo, who is a student at Ahmadu Bello University. Universities exist because of students mainly and research, and we are giving him the privilege. Daniel, please, we can't see you. Daniel?
Yeah, can you see me now?
We can't see you, but ask your question.
All right, thank you, Professor Falola, for the introduction. Can you hear me though?
We can hear you, but we can't see you, but go ahead.
All right, thank you, Prof, for the introduction and for the opportunity to represent student voices on an issue that has far-reaching consequences on the future of Nigerian students. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. Good evening, Your Excellency, Professor Biodun Ogunyemi. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, and thank you for making yourself available to answer some of our questions today. With your permission, I'd like to start with my first question, sir. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
We know the ASUU, all right. We know the ASUU is a union body which engages the federal government to ensure the nation's education at tertiary level operates at globally recognized standards by insisting on a decent welfare packages for teachers and a conducive working environment for teachers and students. How well will you say the union has performed in carrying out this objective, and what have been its biggest challenges, sir?
Thank you very much. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Let me start by thanking Professor Falola for providing this platform. This platform will actually give us enough time, I presume, to clarify issues that have been engaging or bothering people's minds all along about the operations of our union. So I want to thank Professor Falola very profoundly for this platform. Daniel, yes, you have said that a union exists to talk about the welfare of its members and to ensure that the system works better. You are perfect, you are correct. You are also correct to say that we are likely to have challenges along the line. But let me say that the concerns of ASUU go beyond just the welfare of its members. Our understanding of the universities, particularly in our context, within the context of Africa, that is largely underdeveloped, is that the university system should be positioned in such a way that it could become a liberating force. It is the university that should become the incubating center for new ideas, for creating knowledge that can advance the cause of the society. And in every sector of the national life, the university should be present to make a difference. But our main concern in ASUU is that unless and until the university has what it takes to deliver on its mandates, which stands on a tripod of teaching, research, and community service, we cannot actually play our role effectively as a liberating force. Liberating force in terms of not just improving the welfare of our members, but advancing the cause of the society at large. That has been our preoccupation all along, especially when ASUU transformed from the National Association of Universities, NAYUT, which was the first organization of academics in Nigeria. The difference between NAYUT and ASUU today, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, is that whereas NAYUT operated as an elite organization, ASUU identifies with the cause of the suffering masses, and ASUU has conceptualized the university not just as a place where you train elite scholars, but where you also raise new generation of people that can intervene in the plight of the society, especially for an underdeveloped country like ours. Talking about our challenges, yes, we started with the military in the 70s and 80s. ASUU transformed from NAYUT in 1978. That was at the peak of the military rule in Nigeria, before we had this period of brief experience of civil rule when we were between 1979 and 1983. But ASUU came up at a time that was dwindling economy. The resources in Nigeria were reportedly dwindling, given the oil glut, the fall in petroleum prices, as we're currently witnessing now, crude oil, the prices of crude oil, as we're currently witnessing. And the ruling class in Nigeria saw other priorities other than education and decided to play down on education, shifted their emphasis to the political arena and to the other areas that will give them immediate returns for their efforts. ASUU stood up at that point to say, no, we will not allow this regression in our national life to continue. And ASUU stepped in, took up the challenge, and the challenge eventually took us to a point where we had to have brushes with the military government. ASUU was banned and unbanned, particularly between the administrations of Babangida and Abacha military rules. So when we had that kind of experience, ASUU became more determined because we had to identify and work with human rights groups in the country, and we emphasized the need to put human rights at the forefront of Nigeria's development or democratic agenda. So even after 1983, the process continued. And since then, ASUU has been having problems, even with the universities, because the issue of rights, the issue of freedom came to a center stage because the military will not let go. And we have not seen much difference even between the military and the current civilian dispensation. So it's like the issue of autonomy of the universities as the incubating centers for ideas, as the agents of change, and as the vanguard for the helpless and helpless people in the society. That agenda that we have set for ourselves is being consistently challenged. And we have been facing that even up to this present moment. And you will see that even now, our members will have to contend with getting what is due to them because the government wants to impose on them policies that are not in the interest of the system. And I will give you the most current example, which is the one we call IPPIS, Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System, which essentially was designed for the civil service. And it was part of the agenda to bring the university system on the armpit of the bureaucrats, which we've been struggling to resist, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years. So we have really had it tough, such that even now, we still have our members whose salary have been withheld for upward of 4 months, some for as long as 12 months, because our members insisted that IPPIS will not be in the interest of the university system. IPPIS will trample on the autonomy of the universities, and IPPIS will make, we actually cripple universities in terms of the delivery mandate. So the challenges are there, and the challenges have been magnified because of the disposition of the political class, who see universities as avenues for extending their influence, and which we as a union, we have consistently resisted.
Thank you very much, sir, for that illuminating response. And I must say, you've delved into parts of the second question I was going to ask, but I'll still go ahead and ask. The ASUU, since its inception in 1978, sir, has stood for the improvement of tertiary education in Nigeria, doing so in the alternating periods between military and civilian rule. Would you say civilian dispensations have been more receptive and amenable? And how would you rate the current administration's commitment to transforming tertiary education in Nigeria, sir?
As I hinted earlier,
yes,
we have not seen much difference between the military rule as well as the current civilian dispensation, which started in 1999. Because to us, it appears there's still a hangover effect from the long period of military rule in Nigeria. And you will see that most of the top players in the polity actually had military background. So it appears that hangover is there, and that hangover is manifesting in all they do. Hardly will you see a president since 1999 want to book opposition. For instance, at a point we started criticizing General, pardon me, well, it's now Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former General Olusegun Obasanjo. He said ASUU was the problem of Nigeria, and the best way to deal with ASUU was to unleash private university, and then to deal with ASUU such that ASUU will be crushed. And he likened ASUU to a snake, and he said he will cut that snake, bury his body in Lagos, and take the head to Maiduguri. So when you have that kind of orientation or that kind of disposition towards a union of intellectuals, they can hardly harvest their potential for the development of the country. And that is where we have found it difficult to actually make contributions. Even when we throw up ideas, they label us as opposition. A clear example was under the immediate past president, President Goodluck Jonathan, who said that we went on political strike and that all our statements were being sponsored by opposition. At a point, Chief Doyo even came out to say that ASUU was unpatriotic and ASUU was working towards sedition or something like that. So when you start having that kind of orientation among the political class, it will be difficult to say you have seen a radical departure from where we are coming from, the military background and the military dictatorship that we experienced for many years in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, for my third question, the recent strike action, the federal government agreed to the union's demands for the payment of teachers' salary arrears, sparking of allegations that the primary aim of the union struggle has always been for the benefit of teachers, and that its concern for the infrastructural deficit in tertiary education sector is secondary. What is your take on this? Is there any superiority or preference in ASUU's multi-pronged demands for improved tertiary education in Nigeria?
That allegation is not correct. It is not correct to reduce ASUU to a bread and butter unionism. We are given to bread and butter unionism. The last strike you referenced, we came up, we did not suspend the strike until government agreed to release 30 billion as part of the outstanding fund under needs assessment revitalization fund, to which government signed in 2013. And let me tell you this: the last week of March and the first week of this month, I visited 12 universities in the Northeast, monitoring what they did with the last release that we had under revitalization fund. That was the 20 billion that was shared 2019 among over 60 universities in Nigeria. Now, the experience from that monitoring revealed that even that little sum of 20 billion made a lot of difference. I visited universities where they had structures, they didn't have laboratory equipment. I can tell you, in one of the universities, about 5 laboratories were equipped with close to 500 million that they got from that release. The same thing is likely to happen now, where when we have 30 billion that has been allocated. The fund will soon be released, but the policy is that we have to know what they are doing with what was released the last time before the next tranche is made available to the universities concerned. So we can say confidently that our strike has not been about what people will call stomach infrastructure in some quarters, but it has been about empowering lecturers in terms of facilities, in terms of the enabling environment to deliver on their mandate. And of course, you cannot expect lecturers to deliver on their mandate on empty stomach. That is where the two will have to go together. But we go beyond even those two things. We also talk about academic freedom and university autonomy, which I broached earlier. So these issues we take together and they are comprehensive. You will never see us listing payment of salaries as the reason to go on strike. And we also have reason to even have gone on strike after the last strike, because government agreed with us in December to pay all outstanding arrears of salaries. And like I mentioned earlier, we still have well over 500 of our members whose salaries are withheld by the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. So we have these issues that keep evolving, and we do our best to see how we could balance in the interest of our students, in the interest of the parents, in the interest of the nation, and of course, in the interest of scholarship, because we are conscious of our place in the global community of scholars.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that illuminating response. Indeed, our teachers should get their due wages for the
While waiting for him to come back, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Is it back
in the
now?
context of an ASUU.
Are you back? Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now go ahead, Daniel.
Can I continue?
Go on.
All right. You're familiar with the saying, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. In the context of an ASUU federal government standoff, the students are the grass. As we all know, ASUU's choice of striking as a measure for ensuring government compliance is one major swear of public opinion against the union, given its cost on students and their guardians. In your opinion, given the outcome so far, is striking the best option to address issues, and is the union taking any actions to identify a different and yet effective measure that wouldn't cost the students so much?
I've always answered that question by reversing that statement in a way. When two elephants fight, that suffers. Happens when elephants make love. I think we need to look at all the issues from all dimensions. If we choose to play along with government, ignoring the basic ingredients for quality delivery on scholarship in our system, for quality teaching, learning, and research, for effective community service, at the end of the day, not only the students will also suffer, the society at large will suffer, because we will be further underdeveloped. Each time people ask us, what has your strike brought into the system? We point to TED Fund. TED Fund has more or less become the sole source of funding capital projects on campuses of public universities in Nigeria. As of today, if you are in ABU, you can engage them and find out what government has given that university in the last 10 years for capital development. And you will find that less of projects that were carried out. I visited ABU some 2 years back when they were opening the new site, and I found that that were on there, apart from the Dangote intervention. I'm aware of the Dangote's intervention. All projects that were coming up, including the road construction on that new site, were being sponsored with TED Fund and needs assessment fund. So to that extent, we are doing this in the interest of our students, because they too should be interested in maybe the price we have to pay. The price we have to pay to restore the dignity of their certificates. You see, if you are in core sciences, I'll give you the example of where my friend is, Nasir Fage. He will always tell you that if you carry out a research today in nuclear physics, he was trained in ABU. I was trained in ABU in the, I think, late 90s and so for his PhD. If you want to publish a paper in nuclear physics today, they will request for details about your laboratory. And unless you have the cutting edge facility, the state of the art, you cannot be trusted with the outcome of your research. And that is to the disadvantage of the lecturers as well as the students. So what we are doing in effect is to ensure that we put in place the minimum requirements for us to be able to deliver on our mandate and to be able to stand competitiveness, if not in the global arena, at least in the African scene, in the African environment. So we are challenged. And we have always asked people, and they say, is strike the only option? Please advise us on what else we have to do. Before ASUU goes on strike, we must have written several letters, we must have held several meetings, and it is when all options fail that ASUU goes for strike as the option of the last resort. But what government quickly does is to stigmatize us, and they criminalize strike action, which is also endorsed, of course, in the ILO convention. So we are conscious of our place in history, and we are conscious of our historic challenge within the developmental context of Nigeria and indeed Africa. Time was when Nigerian universities were highly rated in Africa, and even within the global scene. Time was when our products were hotcakes in other parts of the world. But today, they are discriminating against us. If any scholar from the Western world visits our laboratory, they are not proud of what we are doing. And we cannot continue like that. So if we have a government, or if we have, as we have had, consistently recorded indifference on the side of political elites, what else do we do? Maybe it's a phase in our development, and we shall grow it. But in the meantime, let me also add that for now, every agreement we sign with government now infusing into it opportunities for periodic review. So this last one we have had a meeting after that. But in the past, government will go to sleep. Now that we have built into it periodic review of our agreements with them, I think that will help us to track the level of implementation and reduce the tensions that characterize non-implementation of agreements.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that explanation. Indeed, I have seen some of the projects, the TED Fund projects you mentioned. I have seen them for myself. I must say that we, the students, are solidly behind you in your endeavor to get us the best education possible in Nigeria. And we wish you Godspeed
Thank you very much.
in the union's activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, and we wish you the best in your graduate students at ABU. There is a suggestion following up on Daniel's question that parents, in response to your question on strike and things like that, are now preferring to send their children to private schools. Are you not worried that over time, private schools will actually overtake in significance the public schools?
Well, thank you very much. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, then President Obasanjo actually said something like that, that he will unleash private universities in order to whittle down the impact of ASUU and public universities. Of course, that is the agenda of the elite class. But I think they too should be worried. They too should be worried. They should be worried that either of two things are likely to happen. If they kill public universities for private universities to thrive, there will be increased corruption in order for those who work in government and public agencies to be able to send their children to the new colonies, because I will call them new colonies for elite education. That is one option. The other option, the other possibility is that this fear about private universities overtaking public universities may actually not be founded. And you know why? The poverty level in this country does not actually support that hypothesis. You see, as of today, we now have 99 private universities. That was before the licensing of 20 additional private universities some 2 weeks back or so. But those 99 private universities, they account for less than 5% of students in Nigerian universities, public and private. So when you see why do they have paucity of students? It's certainly because of the socioeconomic situation in the country. I told you a short while ago that I visited 12 universities in the Northeast, 12 public universities in the Northeast, some 3-4 weeks back. And what I saw in that axis actually frightened me. We had an encounter with a vice chancellor who told us that they were paying, it's a state university, I won't mention the name just to preserve their identity, that they were charging 25,000 and students were still defaulting. And any attempt to raise it by 1,000 will lead to some kind of conflagration, that they could threaten to burn down the whole place. That shows us how sensitive this issue of private versus public is. And my union has never been bothered, because since when have we had private primary and private secondary in Nigeria? Since the 70s. Today, we still have more students in public institutions than private. So if that will happen at all at the university level, it may not be in the immediate. And we believe that with what we are doing, if government can stand by us, that fear is unfounded. Because if public universities are made to work, private universities will fizzle out. I can tell you I'm familiar with some of these private universities. We have private universities in Nigeria that the total population are more than 100. And they find it difficult to pay the so-called lecturers. They don't even pay the lecturers well. That is those on full-time. Those hire on part-time or adjunct, they hardly pay them. So that is enough a discouraging factor. And it's only that maybe some elite groups are beginning to see acquisition of universities of their own as a status symbol. And it should not go that way. You don't venture into a project that may be dead on arrival. So, but we wish them well. Our own mandate is that let us make public universities work. If public universities are working, private universities will go under in no time.
Thank you. We are viewing this live in many platforms. This is just one of the platforms. The one that draws the largest number is Facebook because it consumes less data. So the number that is watching this live is a lot, far more than is represented by Zoom. It's my pleasure to call the next person, Tosin Alagbe, who works for Premium Times and as the director of the Center for the Investigative Journalism. She's very well known. She's one of those who investigated the EndSARS, the Lekki Toll Gate crisis, and we cannot thank her enough. She combines humanities, social sciences with technology, with a degree in bachelor's and master's in computer science, information engineering. She's been a television journalist. She's worked in banking, and she's been a member of many regional technology groups, and she's completing an MBA in technology management. Thank you so much, Tosin, for joining us. We're very grateful.
Thank you for having me, Professor Falola, and thank you, Professor Ogunyemi. Can anyone hear me?
Welcome, Tosin.
We can hear you very well.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Daniel, for setting the stage. So I'll just jump into it quickly. And my first question is what is ASUU doing to prepare students for jobs that do not yet exist? Saying that we're in an age where the curriculum is fast getting out of date and because of advancements in technology, and no one knows the skills that will be required for the future.
Thank you very much. What ASUU can do, and which we have been doing, is for our members to participate effectively in the process of curriculum review. We have on every campus a committee for curriculum review, and this process is also moderated by the NUC. For the NUC sets the standard, what they call BMAS, a benchmark minimum academic standard for every program in the university. And for every university, you are supposed to operate within the ambit of that BMAS. In so doing, every 5 years, an accreditation committee will visit your program. Where you are not reflecting innovation and dynamism, your program may be denied accreditation. And that means you will not admit students in that area. So every university is conscious of that, as moderated by Senate and Curriculum Review Committee on every campus. We, as a union, we can only collaborate with NUC, and we have been trying to do that by maybe making suggestions that we collate from various feedbacks we get through our members across campuses. We cannot claim to review curriculum in all programs, but we can influence the process by injecting new ideas. So products of research are supposed to feed into what you are talking about, and our members are very good at that. Despite the challenges we face on our campuses. We are not relenting. We still have our members who are up and doing in terms of research. And of course, they collaborate with colleagues from outside Nigeria to update their knowledge and to keep to current trends in their respective fields.
Thank you, sir. My next question is, why does it seem like ASUU's voice is not loud when it comes to holding the Nigerian government to account per issues affecting Nigerians? So in the past, and as you rightly alluded to, ASUU would provide, well, I don't know if you alluded to that, but in the past, ASUU would provide alternative policy guidelines about issues such as inflation, unemployment rates, and all of that. They would offer alternative policy guidelines, but right now ASUU seems to be nowhere to be found, and we're only hearing about ASUU, the welfare of ASUU staffers, which is actually it is a valid concern. But really, why don't we hear ASUU's voice per holding the government to account?
That is not totally correct. Perhaps you might say we are not as regular as before, but I can explain that. I must say that we have been bogged down by human-made obstacles put on our path in recent years. And I'll give you two quick examples. The first example which I cited is the issue of IBPIS. The IBPIS, which was imposed on the system, has been a major hurdle for us in terms of balancing our perception or our assessment of corruptive practices, as well as ensuring that our salaries are paid, our salaries and emoluments are paid as I went. In other words, government is saying, well, if you want your salary to be paid seamlessly, you must embrace this platform. And we know that platform is an avenue for corruption. It's a conduit that has been used effectively to siphon government money. And we have proved that beyond reasonable doubt. So when you talk of holding it accountable, we have done that effectively because as of today, we did two newspaper publications, paid adverts from our own fund to get this, to get this out there into the public space. And we insist that it is not the best option for us. So talking about alternative, we have provided alternative. And that led us into commissioning a team that actually worked on our alternative platform, which we call University Transparency and Accountability Solution. We say this one is superior to what government has preferred to curb corruption because the one we have here is open to access and you can easily evaluate.
Can you try Ogunyemi? It's frozen. It's frozen.
Activities and procedures on that platform, unlike I will have to get to the office of the Accountant General in their pay. And the other one due to us in terms of denial of our entitlements. We set out to negotiate with government, and for 3 years, we were unable to agree on just one item until we protested to the public, to the whole world, that this was what was happening. And eventually, after much pressure and persistent pressure on our own part, government acceded to our demand that the negotiation committee should be reconstituted. So I said earlier that we have human-made obstacles put on our part, making it difficult for us because now they are beginning to throw existential challenges The existential challenges will arise from the fact that, well, you have not subscribed to IPPIS, you have no salary. And as we speak, many of our members denied their salaries for several months. We are under pressure from that angle. They also withheld our checkup dues for several months, upward of 1 year. And it was meant to hamstring us. But good enough, we are still able to circumvent those obstacles. So when you say we are not loud enough, we are still talking. Because back on every campus, our members are talking. As we speak, not less than 3 chairpersons of our union have either been sent out of their job or are currently being tried for insubordination or what they call misconduct. What did they do? They raised their voices against corruptive practices in their universities. I can tell you the example of Federal University of Ekiti, where our chairman has been sent out of his job for almost 2 years, and he was not being paid a couple. The union has to come to his aid, and that's what we are managing. We still have issues about if Federal University local, where, or in spite of our petition, is protest. The vice held accountable. So we can talk, and at both ends, we are doing that. We still issue statements at the end of our National Executive Council meetings. Though now we hold our National Executive meetings. On quarterly basis, like I used to do before, when it was noise we're talking about, or the loudness of our voice. Thank you. Hello?
Yeah, you are back. We apologize for that technical problem, but you are back now.
Yes, I just lost the latter part of what you said, but I'm sure that when I watch over again, I'll get that. So my third question to you is, what is ASUU's stand per sexual harassment in universities? I'm sure there are mechanisms in place, but they don't seem to be working. ASUU seems to be in support, and ASUU seems to provide refuge and protection for accused members. What is ASUU doing per sexual harassment? What is ASUU's stand per sexual harassment in universities?
And to add to that question, Premium Times sent wanted to investigate this issue, and many universities did not respond. They didn't cooperate with Premium Times. Please go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you so much. ASUU condemns sexual harassment in any form. In its entirety, ASUU condemns it. ASUU has on every campus a committee on ethics. And we have a committee on ethics that handles reported cases. But we also adopt the informatory approach or preventive approach, because we have gender committee on every campus as well. And on every campus, we have suggestion box. When you put all of this together, we take initiatives to establish some kind of local parentis framework for building relationship with our students, and of course, guiding them in all areas of their existence while they are under our watch. Because we see our students not just as our
That's internet issue, the network problem in Nigeria.
as customers in the future. They are
Now it's gone completely. Please, you have to bear with us. It's an issue that we all worry about whenever we do this, because they rely on internet providers. We give them the alternative of calling him by phone. Unfortunately, I don't think we practice this with him. Meanwhile, whoever wants to, he's been raising a number of issues. Whoever wants to respond, he's been raising issues on private universities. He's been raising issues on parents. We can use this opportunity if we have any member who wants to say something for now, and when he's back, we will reconnect with him. Professor Omotoye Olorode, you used to be the president of ASUU. Can you highlight him so he takes over? Or is Ogunyemi back? Ogunyemi, are you back? Oh, he's back. He's back now. Okay. He's back. Please, sir, continue. Continue, sir.
Yes, so what I was saying in essence is that while ASUU condemns sexual harassment in any form, shade, or color, we will not allow any agency or government to paint all of us with one brush. There was this bill they brought to the National Assembly, and they started calling lecturers predators. I mean, that's presumptuous. Yes, there are bad eggs, but it is not everybody that is bad. There are good mentors in the system. There are those who have raised very useful ladies. I have been chairman at many of my former students' wedding ceremonies. If I had harassed them, they will not remember me on graduation. And we have many of our colleagues till today. Their female students are part of their families. So we need to put things in context and not just assume that because some few lecturers behave unethically, everyone is unethical. We need to reinforce the existing structures. Where they are not working, what do we need to do to make them work? What level of engagement and conversations do we need to put better structures in place? For instance, we at our own end, we have done some critical analysis, and we have found that even some of these maybe notorious elements that people talk about, some of them even come into the system under questionable circumstances. Maybe that may be part of it. The filtering system, those who don't have business in universities, once they find themselves in universities, will they not abuse the privilege? So we need to be more holistic. We need to analyze all issues. We are ready for engagement in order to make things work better. But for people to stay away from us and to believe they have all the answers, I will say once again that it is premature, and it may not provide the solution we are looking for. We need to work together. We need to properly define the problem, and we need to situate the solutions so that we can have something that will be more enduring. That is the way we approach the matter.
Thank you so much, Professor Ogunyemi rather. And just to bounce off that, my previous question is, so how often does ASUU train and speak to the members about sexual harassment? So there's it comes in different forms. So I believe there's a need to also talk to your members. How often does ASUU speak to them about it, train them? When you guys have meetings, is it an active part of the conversation?
We have various organs in the union. When we say ASUU, just like the university system it works itself, ASUU works through committees and various organs of the union. I mentioned earlier that every campus has a committee on gender, has ethics committee. These two committees, the conveners of those committees are supposed to be part of the Congress meetings. And we expect every campus to hold at least one Congress meeting in 2 months, because we have reasons to pass down information and to engage ourselves. That's at least. There are occasions where we will need to hold more regular Congress meetings where information and ideas are shared. So when we meet, we expect every committee to report on their activities. We expect every committee to present guidelines on their operation, and so on and so forth. So through those committees in branches, reports go to branch executives. Branch executives take reports to zones, and zones take reports to the national. So we operate that way in order to ensure that there is good connectivity at various levels, so that we can track the activities of various committees. At every NEC meeting, all committees also report, because there are committees at the national level that branch committees feed into. And that process, we know what is happening on every campus.
Thank you, sir. So my final question, please pardon me, Prof. Falola, just one question. So it is where the entire world entered the new normal last year. And a lot of universities, schools, everything, in fact, almost everyone had to segue into digital platforms. What is ASUU doing to prepare Nigeria and the Nigerian education system, Nigerian university system for another pandemic? We hope it doesn't happen again, but what's ASUU doing? Is ASUU also thinking towards digital learning in Nigeria?
Well, thank you, Tosi. We are not averse to innovation, just as I said earlier, and we know we are all existing now in the digital world. There's no pretending about it, and because of that, we have always insisted that our universities must be positioned to respond to challenges even before the COVID-19 pandemic became an issue. Let me remind you, when we went on strike in 2013, we came back with a memorandum of understanding signed with the then President Goodluck Jonathan. And in that memorandum, it was stated that the government will massively inject a total of 1.3 trillion over a period of 6 years in order to reposition our universities for the transformation they need for them to stand global competition or competitiveness. Imagine Nigerian universities having access to such fund between 2013 and 2019, you can imagine what level of transformation will have happened. All this thing about the digital, optical fiber, optic fiber, that we are now struggling to lay so that we could have improved connectivity. I mean, they will have become a thing of the past. So certainly we don't need outsiders to tell us to embrace innovation. We are trained to initiate innovative ideas. Scholars are trained to be creative, to challenge possibilities, to break frontiers. So we will not be living up to our billing if we are not responding to challenges. And that is why proactively, we've always been taking Nigerian government on that, look, government, the world ahead of us, the world will leave us behind if we fail to move with the current. And so the currency of ideas that are coming now, they are not new to us. We predicted it 2013 to now. But I can tell you, we are struggling to get just 250 out of the 1.3 trillion government promised us in 2013. Can you imagine? That's a far cry. And in this business, you are as good as your tool of work. I just gave the example of nuclear physics when at the outset of this discussion. You want to publish in a world-class journal, and they ask you, describe your laboratory. And you will tell them where you bought the equipment. Because at that level, every equipment that has been manufactured in that field has a register. So it's not a question about embracing the digital option. It's not an option. It is inevitable. And we're already there, only that we're not fully there. But we can do better if we get the necessary support. And that is why you continue to see us crying and shouting at the top of its voice about repositioning our universities.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Before you take off, Tosin, let me do some follow-up. Our first question is very important, and I think we need to address it. So when a student enters a university, 5 years later, the fields have changed. New occupations have emerged. So what they do in many universities now, including mine, is to create a category undecided. In fact, a large percentage of students who apply to us, they fill that column undecided. Because when you and I were in the universities, disciplines were stable, occupations were stable. Parents knew only about engineering, medicine, and law for mobility. But today, the disciplines are so many. Almost within 4 or 5 years, new fields emerged, new subfields emerged. When I joined the university here, there used to be, there was no faculty of geophysics. It's now a whole faculty with departments. So as a follow-up to your last answer, how do we respond? I know this is not just an ASUU question, but how do we build an infrastructure to respond to the demands of younger people, more talented, internet savvy? They can access information everywhere in the world. How do we create universities that can respond immediately?
Well, Prof, I think the challenge here is about research opportunities. All those expansion and innovations you see in the Western world, they are products of research. It is research that will link you with the new needs. Because the product of, at the end of every research endeavor, You come up with proposals, you come up with suggestions. And what you do as follow-up, as you are saying, in creating new structures for learning, new opportunities for advancement of knowledge, is in response to research. Until and unless we have these facilities, basic infrastructure, to be able to, because we can talk of collaboration with the outside, I mean, with our colleagues, with our friends, the diaspora scholars, which some of us are already doing. But you have limitations when it comes to exchanges. I mean, I can't imagine anybody coming from university now to any university in Nigeria, maybe for sabbatical leave or for short program, particularly in the area of science. I mean, there was a time our colleagues visited a university in Egypt, and they found that in the College of Medicine, a department has as many as 7 laboratories. 7 laboratories. How many laboratories can we boast of, even in the College of Medicine in Nigeria? Now they are talking of molecular laboratories, and it's like they are doing universities favors by saying we will get some of these molecular laboratories into the university. Those are the basic things that should have been there, have been issued. But because we are bereft of the basic infrastructure and equipment that we need to train 21st century graduates, we are challenged in responding as quickly as demanded, of course. Yes, universities are supposed to be dynamic environments. Senate says, the university senate is supposed to be the driver of the curriculum dynamics that should be happening on our campuses. But they are circumscribed. Members of Senate cannot actually express fully the ideas they have when they do not have an environment that is supportive. I'll tell you that even when government budgets X million or X billion for infrastructure in the universities, they hardly release up to 10%, federal or state. So when you place proposed budget with implemented budget, you will see a wide gap. So we don't have plans for our universities. Unlike what you see in the Western world, we are bereft of the tools and equipment that we need, and our ability to do cutting-edge research is limited because of our circumstances. So I agree with you that we need such innovations, that we need to move in the direction the rest of the world is going in terms of embracing new ideas. But how much have we done to consolidate on the little that we have? But for ASUU, many vice chancellors will tell you that our university, public universities in Nigeria, will have gone under. In the last 10, 20 years, our laboratories will have become totally empty. When we carried out the needs assessment in 2012, I visited the first generation university. This is not something I should be saying on a global platform like this. Thank God, I visited that university last year. The trend has been reversed. But what did I find? In a first generation university, they were using kerosene stove in place of Bunsen burner. Taps in the laboratory were not running. Tell me, what kind of experiment? They were fetching water in buckets to carry out experiments in chemistry laboratory. What kind of experiment will come out of that place? This is not something we should be saying in a global platform like this, but it happened. It's documented. Prof, I can send you that report. That is, it's until you understand that kind of situation in which we find ourselves, you cannot fully appreciate why ASUU is so passionate about our advocacy for change in the university system.
Will it be possible, Mr. President, to launch a campaign to Nigerian parents that universities may not be for everyone? That is not the only avenue to succeed in life. That we may need to build technical schools, build trade centers. In the last 1 year, China has downgraded many universities to technical schools in need of technical people. But the argument is that if you don't slap the name university to an institution, parents are not convinced. What is wrong with Trade Center Oshogbo of the past? What is wrong with the Polytechnic where students are well trained, they have great skills, they can become innovators, they can build good houses and big roads?
Thank you, Prof. I think that is an option that the students will have to make, the candidates will have to make. You cannot impose those options, because they will also tell you that we have countries where polytechnics have been turned into universities. And they will ask these political elites that are saying, well, universities are not the only option. They will ask them, how many of their children are attending technical colleges? How many of them are going to polytechnics? You see, Nigerians are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that the elites are reproducing themselves in their children, and they are taking measures to deny opportunities to the children of the poor. They have enough resources to send their children abroad, and when they come back, they fix them before you know it in what we can call juicy appointments. They work in central banks. They work in all those places where they are close to being paid in dollars. So this consciousness is increasing, and that is why we say it will be in the interest of the elites to actually make these options open and not impose on the children of the poor, just as they are trying to price education out of the reach of the children of the poor. I told you about my experience in the Northeast. It was not palatable until I visited those universities and I actually engaged the vice chancellors there. I did not fully appreciate the enormity of the socioeconomic problems being faced in that axis. And we can see the manifestation in the rebellion and insurgents going on. So we need to situate these things correctly. Well, universities are not the only avenue for empowering the youth, but we need to show them that it is not because we want the children of the poor not to aspire to attain a university degree or a higher university degree. The thing must be made optional and attractive to them. Not going out with preachments. Why are all of you aspiring to go to universities? That's not the way to go. People have shown the example of those who made it in the Western world who did not go to universities. Perhaps modeling people like that and showing them the advantage and possibilities. People can go to polytechnics and they can later acquire degrees. So there are options. I'm an educationist and I should be able to tell you the possibilities along this pathway. So it's not a problem, but maybe it is the error in rendering.
Thank you very much. Tosin Alagwe of Premium Times, we are very grateful to you. The takeaway question is on sexual harassment. And in our report, it will be one of those that we will emphasize. Thank you very much. Those of you who have been raising your hands, it is not yet time for the audience. We first of all have to finish with our guest interviewers before we can call on you. Many platforms are running. We are grateful to Tunde Kelani for his platform. We are grateful for the Laroye for his platform of over 500,000 people that are participating in this event. We will never know the number. Last Sunday, over 40-something thousand were able to see the Obe interview. So the Zoom is just one of the numerous platforms, and we're about to license some other people to carry this alive. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next person, who is an administrator, is a vice chancellor, because the way we've set it up is students, the media and public, administrator, and a professor. So our next person is Professor Labode Popola, who is the current vice chancellor of Osun State University. He used to be an ASUU member at the University of Ibadan, where he was a professor of forest economics and sustainable development. And while vice chancellor, is taking that specialization of sustainable development into one of the biggest projects in the Nigerian academy, converting it to a degree from BA to PhD in various disciplines. We are very grateful for his initiative in that regard. He finished at Ibadan, worked at Ibadan, where he became a professor in forest economics in 2002. And thereafter, he has served in various capacities, head of department, sub-dean, and dean. He's raised so many funds. He's participated in so many management. He's been part of the MacArthur Foundation Award. He's established programs. He's extremely conversant with national and international academy. He's a member of various organizations. He's won various awards and honor. He supervised so many students at both level, at various levels, PhD. At one count, he supervised over 55 master's degrees and PhD as well, and is a community leader. Professor Popola, we're very grateful for joining us to interview President Ogunyemi. It's your turn, sir.
Professor, please, I believe he needs to start his video for us to bring him on.
What happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And sir, please, can you also unmute?
Can you unmute?
I will, and I have done that. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good evening, Professor Toyin Falola and my friend and colleague, Biodun Ogunyemi, a person of struggles of many years. Let me say categorically that ASUU struggles are national struggles. They are patriotic struggles. The problem some of us have about it is the tactics. I have a couple of questions that I will ask. First, as a student of many years, as a teacher of many years, and as an administrator and community leader. I want to find out what your notion is on funding of education, particularly at the tertiary level. I ask this because in our own context, our union is opposed to co-funding. Co-funding in this context, I refer to government doing its own bits, parents doing their own bits, the communities and societies doing their own bits, we in the academia looking for grants to support research. It's a partnership all over the world. That's what obtains. There is no free lunch anywhere. It's not about any elites not wanting the ordinary people to acquire education. What is the notion of our union? Because we are opposed to payment of fees, and it's no longer fashionable that people don't pay fees. So I want to know what our opinion is on this.
Well, thank you, Prof. Let me start with this introduction about user. Professor Falola said you used to be.
I am still a member. I am still a member of ASUU.
Yeah, well, maybe you have revalidated your membership. Maybe you have revalidated your membership. It's okay. It's okay. That's all right. You are welcome on board. You are welcome on board. But talking seriously, I don't have any personal notion of funding other than the position of the union. For ASUU, funding is an ideological issue. Ideological in the sense that we cannot insist that until we come up with a fixed amount as tuition fee, other stakeholders are not contributing to the funding of education. And I will illustrate this clearly. As we speak, even in federal universities, we have vice chancellors that have introduced as much as 60,000 as a tuition, as an acceptance fee. Yes, acceptance. I'm sure when you went to the university, you are not made to pay acceptance fee for the admission offered you in that university. The point I'm making here is that vice chancellors have devised means and ways of levying students without calling those levies tuition. But taking it deeper than that, our ideological position about fixing an amount as tuition fee and escalating it every time or every year was informed way back in 1978 with the nature of our state. Nigeria is an underdeveloped country. And our position is that if government gets its priority right, government can fund education at all levels. Of course, with parents playing their roles. As we speak now, many of the universities have over 70%. That is where they have hostel accommodation as non-residential students. These students, they transport themselves to universities. These students, they feed themselves. These students, they buy their books. The scholarship that you and I enjoyed in those days are no longer there for them. And we are saying parents and other stakeholders are not contributing. Nobody stops the contribution of alumni association. Every time we negotiate with government, we bring out these options. And let me remind you, Prof, because I know you were active around that 92, that we had the first or the landmark agreement under Professor Atairu Jega. The introduction of the fund was actually meant to provide succor and take away the burden of overtasking the students. We did a calculation in the ongoing negotiation with government, and we found that even when you say it costs about about 1.5 million to train a student for first degree, the parents equally contribute close to that amount, if not exactly that amount. Which means, as we have now, from our own analysis, it's like 50-50 share. And so when we say you want to take it further, I know in your university you charge what you can call reasonable fees, 200,000, 300,000. When you do that, and you want to take that to 500 or 600, then it means that you are privatizing the university education, and you make it inaccessible. Where the federal universities, where they provide support for the students, is that there are indigent students who cannot afford the cost of private universities, and in some cases, the cost of some state universities. If they work hard enough, they can find outlets in federal universities. And that is why we are saying that even though state universities have found a way of saying they are certain, they have concurrent powers to run universities and to exercise their freedom, there should be a window for indigent students to be able to realize their potentials without necessarily being bogged down because of the inability of their parents to pay tuition fees. So that's why I say it's ideological. If we take education as an instrument for the development of our society, as many of our students, of our children that acquire university education, they hold the promise for a better Nigeria. They become the agents of change that we are looking for. And that's why I said it is ideological. They will change, their orientations will change, and they will come back to contribute meaningfully to all areas of the development in our country. So it is ideological. And when you say other parts of the world, we are also aware that you can still enjoy free, even postgraduate education in Germany as of today. In France, there are public universities where you pay a couple. So we should not come here and tell ourselves and be telling Nigerians that, well, ASUU is the stumbling block against raising money to fund education in Nigeria. That perception is wrong, and we will always resist it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I know that, and from experience, parents are willing to contribute to the funding of education in this country. You and I know how we got our education. So I want to leave that as such. It is impracticable for Nigeria, unless we're deceiving ourselves. Let's put together all our earnings as a country, the entire revenue of this country, divided by the population of this country. None of us is entitled to up to 1 million naira. So the reality is that unless we're deceiving ourselves, the government cannot only fund education. And I want to leave it at that. My second question, Mr. President. I'm happy you mentioned TED Fund. We all struggle to have TED Fund, but the reality is that TED Fund is still a government outfit. Yes, the struggle was ours. The government accepted it, and it's being managed by the government. That is one outlet for the funding of tertiary education in this country. Now, the question I want to ask here is about the unfortunate nature of our country in terms of financial transparency and accountability. Most of the times we blame corruption on the politically exposed. And I know as a professor, as an administrator, as a student of several years, the corruption in the educational system in this country is legendary. Corruption in our educational system is legendary. And I don't know what ASUU is doing about this. There are leaking pipes in our educational system. What is ASUU doing about this in terms of corruption? Thank you.
Sorry, before I go back to that question, let me also add a footnote to your last statement on my answer to your first question. Well, I will not deny you your perception of the problem, but I will also want you to situate your solution correctly. What percentage of parents in Nigeria are we talking about? What percentage of parents in Nigeria are we talking about? Are we talking of 70% or are we talking of 30%? I think that is what we need to address at some point. And I've just told you that there are some countries, even in the Western world, where university education is still provided free. So we need to put that into context. Now, talking about leakages, yes, ASUU is aware of that. I want to say that it appears too much burden is now being passed to the union. And each time we attempt to intervene, we are either brushed or there are attempts to crush our members who are at the forefront of such agitations. I mentioned a while ago that we have universities today where ASUU leaders who are compromising were sent out of their jobs. We had a chairman at the University of Ilorin. Because he did a protest, he documented issues of corruption about the university, and he sent to EFCC. The then sitting vice chancellor sent him out of his job. For many months, it took court judgment to restore him back to his job. In Federal University of Ekiti today, our chairman there has been sent out of his job for over 2 years. What was his offense? He raised issues, he documented issues against the sitting vice chancellor and sent to the Federal Ministry of Education, sent to the presidency, and of course, sent to the National Secretariat of ASUU. He was dismissed because when you say you suspend somebody, the law says you can suspend somebody for 6 months and place that person on half salary. But this person has been sent out of his job for about 2 years or over 2 years now. He's not being paid a kobo. And it's only the new VC that is saying that, well, we will settle out of court. In other words, I'm saying that there are cases that we have taken up, even up to the EFCC. But nothing happened. You know the powers of the vice chancellor. And of course, you have also tried to use that power against us. But I won't go into the details here. No, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't.
No, Prof.
Let's address the issues.
I won't
Mr.
be personal.
President, let's address the issues.
I promise you.
Let's address
But the issue is that it would be wrong of any administrator to accuse ASUU of being indifferent to corruption. Of course, there are those who could be pliable. And there are also vice chancellors who are planting molds in the leadership of our union so that they could have their way and they could create confusion where opposition is springing up. So we have all these kind of experiences, and we know that at every point we handle cases as they come. So it is not correct to say ASUU is not doing anything. Only that we are struggling against those that we call formidable forces within and outside the universities.
Well, thank you very much. I never said ASUU was doing nothing. What I wanted to know is what are we doing? What can we do further? And as administrator, I even know that some of our members are even interested in contract awards. That I know. That I know.
Let me give you some of this. Let me give you one example of what we are doing. In our 2009 agreement with federal government, we proposed a budget monitoring committee. That budget monitoring committee, which for short we call BMC, is supposed to be a mechanism for ensuring transparency and accountability in the system, because the composition of the BMC is such that we have an external member of council as the chairperson, and we have representatives of all unions on campus, including student unions, and they are supposed to monitor how funds are being utilized in the system. In all our intervention funds, we go out to monitor, and the first thing we ask for is BMC. I'm sure some 2 weeks back or so, a committee was in your university, and they will have asked for your BMC. I'm sure, let me also tell you here, if your BMC is not properly constituted, you don't get the next tranche. It's not a threat, sir, but that is the standard practice. So we have putting mechanisms in place. We only hope and pray that administrators will allow the mechanisms to work.
Well, I'm glad you know my position about corruption. You know it, for which some of our union members fought me. But what I'm saying is that as a union, we should do more. I'm very sad when I see projects in our universities, projects that are not worth 50 million, awarded at 200 million, some abandoned, many substandard.
The BMC is not working. The BMC is not working.
Well, I'm saying that because our union struggled for TED Fund, our union struggled for some of these things, we should be interested in how these funds are utilized.
We have suggested BMC for TED Fund.
Okay.
We have suggested BMC for TED Fund. If we make TED Fund, if we make BMC work, then we'll begin to see better results.
Okay, let's do more. That's my plea. Let's do more. Now, my third question.
Okay, and we are open to suggestions. If you have more suggestions, you can pass to us.
Please let us work on this, because my heart bleeds. The kind of money that goes into the university system and the output that we see, they are not commensurate at all. Okay. I mean, if you see a project in a private university and they tell you they spend 20 million, in a public university, it could be 100 million. And I feel this is not good enough for us in this country. Now, the third question I would like to ask, I think some other people have talked about it, but let me put it straight. It seems unionism, not just about ASUU alone. Unionism in Nigeria is now synonymous with strikes. I'm personally worried about the multiple negative externalities of these strikes. We have the poor global image. I have suffered it because I operate a lot of grants, and I know the impression the global community has about our university system. Poor global image of the academia in Nigeria. We also have low international patronage. I have supervised many students from other countries. Now, no student wants to come to Nigeria because they'll tell you that a 3-year program will take 6 years. And these are because of strikes. So we are supposed to be solution providers as academics. We are supposed to advise our country. We are supposed to inform policy. Don't you think we need a change of strategy? This is becoming too much. It's no longer fashionable for universities to go on strike for several months. And our governments are not necessarily the worst in terms of funding of education. I say this as somebody who has moved around a lot. I've moved around a lot. I've operated in many universities across the globe. Nigeria is not the worst in terms of funding. It can be better. Can't we find a better strategy than closing down the universities for 9 months, 10 months? Nobody does it again anywhere in the world.
Well, thank you, Prof. Let me start from where you ended. That we are not the worst in terms of funding. But must we wait until we become the worst? Why don't we think of where we are coming from? We are among the best. Why should we continue to regress? I want to ask you, before the TED Fund and the needs assessment, were you proud of your laboratories in UI? Yeah, I was also in UI. I knew the faculty I left when I left UI, and I know what is there now. So we must benchmark our judgment against the best, not against the worst. That is the first thing I want to say, and that is where we are coming from. Prof, to be honest to yourself, in the last 10 years, if you are to calculate what your owner government has given you to operate ASUU State University, as against what you are getting in terms of capital votes from both needs assessment and TETFOR, I'm not sure you can say you got up to 30% of what you needed, or of the totality, because I have the records. I know in 2030, your university got about 1 billion. And I know since then, you have taken some, I think 198 million, and now some other millions are coming to you. The point I'm making here is that if students are no longer coming to Nigeria, don't place it on strike alone. Just talk of deterioration in our operational environment. That is very important. It's key. It's key. I just mentioned what I saw in 2012. In a first generation university, could you have imagined it? That they were fetching water. I will send the report if you doubt me. Fetching water to the chemistry lab. I know you are connected with Professor Yidu, who is proud to present you as a student in UI. When you are in chemistry in UI, compare it to what you see in your laboratory in chemistry lab now. This is what we saw. This is what I saw in the field. They were using kerosene stove in place of Bunsen burner. Can we allow that to continue? Will you be able to attract students even from the Republic of Benin under that kind of situation in a first generation university? So we need to contextualize our objection to strike. Look, you are pushed to a point that you say, well, if you want to kill me, just kill me. But I will raise my voice against this situation. This is where ASUU is coming from. ASUU is coming from a point that even you administrators who are hitting us, when you are the end beneficiaries of our strike action, you administrators who are hitting us, you know the truth, but because you want to showcase yourself as performing,
no,
you want everything to pull down our struggles.
No, absolutely no.
No, we've seen those things happening. I will not be talking about you directly.
Absolutely no. The point has to be made.
Those who are saying strikes,
President,
those who are saying
has to be made.
Are no longer fashionable.
President,
we want them to advise us. What options do we have?
Now I say this because you've been repeating. We're talking about facilities, talking about poor laboratories. And I'm also talking as a global player. That it's not government that does all of these things. In some universities abroad, you're shown your office, it's up to you to equip your laboratory. I mean, that's the fact. How many of us are actually applying for grants? I cannot remember when last I asked UI to fund any of my trips, to fund any of my researches. I think as a union, we need to support our colleagues. We need to let them know that university business is a serious business. When you just leave everything to government, we won't get to where we are supposed to be. Government cannot fund education alone. I'm saying this as a global player. And like you suggested, we can talk privately. We need to re-strategize. Those people who don't want to come to Nigeria, it's not because of the poor equipment, poor facilities that you talk about. They reach out to me, they want to come to Nigeria, but they tell you, why should I come to country? A program of 3 years, I spent 6 years. It is about the strikes. We shouldn't deceive ourselves. We can talk, we are all into this matter together. Let's find a way of re-strategizing. Strike of 9 months, 10 months doesn't happen anywhere in the world again. We are becoming too notorious for that. And I want to plead.
Prof,
President,
I take that as your opinion. You have never hidden your hatred for us.
Opinion. It's
No,
not my
Prof,
opinion.
Prof,
Do
let me make this point. Let me make this point.
Do a survey amongst our students, even amongst our colleagues.
Let me make this point, Prof.
Thank you.
Even where they show you your laboratory, and encourage you to equip your laboratory, they don't ask you to provide your water. They don't ask you to provide your electricity. They don't ask you to provide your internet. You see, these are basic things that you need to put in place. How do you assess a government that has not funded the existing universities and they are proliferating them? How do you, what is your reaction to that? Proliferation of universities. Is it helping us?
We will await the return of Professor Labode. Hello?
Hello?
We will await his, I think his internet went off. While awaiting the return of Professor Labode, I can take one question from the audience. One question from the audience, please. Recognize one person for me, just one person.
Professor, I believe Mr. Haliru Salaki raised up his hand.
Yeah, please ask a question while awaiting the return. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. Hello.
Okay. Please, you said unmute Junior Shun. Please, Obina, unmute Junior Shun. Unmute Junior Shun. We will do that. He said he has another one. Hold on, please. Junior Shun.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Yes. I'm back.
Okay. Please take him back. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Back. Please go ahead, sir. Please take off for now, Mr. Majid Alabi. Junior Shun, where is Junior Shun? Shagun. Yes. Can you remove me, please? Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Please, you need to unmute.
Unmute yourself, sir. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Yes, I have unmuted.
Yes, now we can hear you now. We're back.
Okay. The independent survey that I have done is that many people are losing scholarships. They are losing fellowships. They are uninterested in coming to Nigeria because of strikes. And I'm not saying this to denigrate our union. I'm only saying that we should find alternative strategies. We can discuss this. And I'm insisting, Nigeria is not the worst when it comes to funding of education. We are not yet there, definitely. And I think we should re-strategize, look for that means of engaging. Now you said it, government accepted our struggle to accept TED Fund. TED Fund is a product of funds from my state, from your state, from other states. It is still public fund. It is still government money indirectly. So I don't think it's going to be appropriate for our union to think that government is not funding when there is TED Fund, funding in billions. I know what I have done in my university with TED Fund money. Now you talk about laboratories not being good. I also know that many universities are having better laboratories now, not necessarily because they went on strike. If you come to my university, you see good quality laboratories. They are not products of strike. So I am only saying that we should re-strategize. We can still get to the end. We can still achieve our aim without this disruption. It is not doing us any good. So hopefully I can go on to my fourth question. Can I go on to my fourth question, sir?
Sir, please go ahead.
Okay, my fourth question. And this is also a perception and also a reality to some extent. And I want to ask, to what extent is it true that some members of our union use activism as a replacement for hard work and diligence, and they end up blackmailing vulnerable university administrators for promotion and other personal benefits? I have examples. As a worker in the university and now as an administrator. When you hear young lecturers discussing among themselves and they tell you that, look, there are two ways of making it. You either work hard or you belong to a union. I don't think this is good enough for our system. To what extent is this true?
Well, thank you very much. Your concluding thoughts on strike, I would say, is well noted, and of course, it's not new to us. We know your stand. But with due respect to you, Prof, we will want those who think strike should be banished to give us alternative strategies that they think will work. You have banned a strike in your university, and I don't know how that is helping you to get what you want from government. But it can work for you. Maybe it will work for others. However, we have always insisted that if you have an agreement that you have negotiated for years, and after writing 20 letters or more, after holding several meetings, and this government tells you we are deaf, we are deaf and dumb. Take the example of doctor strike the last time. We all witnessed it. They were reluctant to go on strike. But it was only strike that fetched them. The attention needed. You should understand the psychology of Nigerian leaders. You may be exceptional, or from your own perception, you might think that talking to them will make them change. But I think the aggregate opinion of our members is the only language government in Nigeria understands. For now, is strike. They will push you to the point that until either there is threats of strike or actual strike, nobody will move. You have banned strike in your university. I wish you the best. I hope it helps you. Now, this issue of opportunism that you have raised, it happens in any organization. But I will place it on two things. You have said some young lecturers will say there are two ways to rise in the system. Either you are ready to work hard or you belong to the union. I don't think that perception, that second perception, I think is the predominant thing. And when you see those who are talking like that, you have to go back. You are experienced, you are an administrator, you belong in the system, and so you know about the tradition. How do this category of lecturers get into the system? You know the kind of pressures that are brought to bear. If you advertise for position, academic positions in your university today, you can imagine the number of letters that you will receive from politicians. If you are not strong enough to insist on due process, you will end up getting people who have no business being in the university coming into the system. And once they come through political platform, then what should you expect from them? You also know how vice chancellors emerge in Nigerian universities today. You know. And we were there together in Oka. That day, Professor Hido talked about cascading mediocrity. Cascading mediocrity is all about getting people who are not qualified to be in position to be there. And they will be looking for people who are also not as competent as themselves to occupy low ranks. And the thing will percolate to the lowest level in the system. So some of us got back into the system because of our performance in university. So we were cut out for the job. When people are cut out for the job, you keep up your records because you have something to talk about. I don't think any university I went in Nigeria, anybody will say I had no business being in the university. And I know about your records too. So we know ourselves in the system. So if we can go back to that tradition of attracting the brightest and the best, these things you are talking about, opportunism, will not be there because we know at some point our records will be made open. But if people come on the platform of political connection, they will use opportunism to rise to the highest level. So I don't know how people became VCs. People who became VCs will also be obliged. If they came through political platform, we'll be obliged to dance to the political to their political godfathers. That's the truth. So opportunism is a value chain, if you like. One opportunism will lead to another opportunity, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. So much to talk about some of these issues. Let me say that we have not banned strike in Osun State University. What we have done is to apply the labor law. You see, strike can go on anywhere. I have colleagues in UK universities. When they decide to go on strike, they know that they don't get paid. The last strike that took place in the UK, they had to refund money to students. So yes, it would be good to go on strike, but I also think that it's not proper that you go on strike for 10 months and you want to get paid. It's never done anywhere in the world. Me, I'm speaking as a Nigerian. I'm also speaking as somebody who operates in Nigeria and also knows what goes on elsewhere. So Osun State University has not banned strike. All we have said is that you can go on strike, but you don't get paid. And I need to also say this. When you are a university administrator and you have to accede to push from some high places to employ people, you're not doing well. I also want to say that there are pressures within. Our colleagues also pile pressures on administrators. Our colleagues blackmail administrators to do things that ordinarily they would not want to do. So I don't think it is proper to just blame the so-called elites, the so-called people in power for many of these things that do happen. We have people littered in our university system today who are not necessarily people imposed by politicians. They are people we attracted into the system by ourselves. And I know people who became professors not because they have anything to profess. We need to tell ourselves some truth. We have examples, but we cannot be talking about these examples in a public platform like this. My final question, you and I know that we've been in this business for a while. You and I know that I was part and parcel of the struggles. Now, what we used to have was a union that thrived on arguments. We will argue, we will disagree, and at the end of the day, superior arguments will prevail. What I see now, it's like, oh, once you don't toe the line of the union, you are labeled, just like I've been labeled, anti-ASUU. I can never be anti-ASUU. But I believe that in the academia, it's about argument. And superior argument prevails. Like the matter of tactics that I'm talking about, let us discuss it. There is no reason why we have to label those who disagree with our current trajectory as being anti-ASUU. Let's go back to the good old days of a responsive and accommodating and intellectual and a developmental unionism. That is what will get us the goal that we want. All said and done, I want to wish our union well, but it's important that from now we try to change our strategy. Strikes are destructive, they are disruptive, they are setting us back, and I'm not very sure if we do the cost-benefit analysis, the strikes have actually been beneficial to us as a union as a university system, and as a country. I rest my case.
Please don't go, don't go.
Yes, Prof. I think I will respond to 3 or 4 things in your submissions. I'm trying to constrain myself not to be too personal, but you are too strategic for me to allow you to escape some of these salvos. With some of these salvos you have fired. In the first place, you and I know that you walked out of the union in UI, and it's on record. But I don't want to go into the details. So to say we don't
let us go into the details if you want it, Biodun.
Yeah, no, Prof.
For example, the union has become so interested in who becomes HOD, who becomes dean, who becomes director, who becomes a vice chancellor. And we all cannot belong to a union, and the union supports someone against other people. So I worked out on purpose.
Prof, the point I'm trying to make really is that you are crossed with the union. So you have some level of bitterness against the union. So if you have the opportunity to hit us, you will hit us hard. And that you have been doing. Yeah, you said you didn't ban unionism or you didn't ban a strike, but you have been sanctioning our members who went on strike in order to discourage strike. And you have said that in Europe, you go on strike, you either reform students or you are not paid. Well, I say you should properly contextualize this discussion. You have to properly contextualize this discussion. Otherwise, we'll be missing very critical points. What is your understanding of an underdeveloped society? An underdeveloped society, what is your understanding of it? That is where we have to proceed from. You see, a lot of things go on as aberration. I mentioned earlier that it may be a phase. It may be a phase in the process of our development as a system, as a university system. Because certainly we will not continue like this. We are hoping and praying that the time will come that we have people who are pro-people in power. People who know that, for instance, the chapter 2 of our constitution, where education is declared free at all levels, will be made justiciable, and Nigerians can begin to claim their rights. It's not that we cannot fund education or we don't see it as priority. It's a debate we can continue from now to tomorrow. And I've also cited the example of countries outside Africa where education is still provided free at all levels. But the third point I want to make, Prof, is that if you have seen examples of those who blackmail vice chancellor, I want to believe you are not the type of vice chancellor that could be blackmailed.
I cannot be blackmailed, definitely.
Why not expose them?
Definitely.
Why not probe into their past?
Cannot be blackmailed.
That's the point we're making. We have seen an example of vice chancellors who are corrupt, who are attacking our members because they are corrupt, and we expose them. But they set out to hit us and possibly crush us. So these things are happening. You don't just look at your own side of the coin without thinking of what is happening on the other side. And also, it is not true that ASUU does not encourage debates. It is just because of your maybe sphere of operation. Now that you are an administrator, you are on the other side of the divide, and you have joined the elite class.
That's so interesting, Biodun. That's interesting.
You are on the other side of the divide.
No, definitely no.
When I say you're on the other side of the divide, I'm saying it guidedly. You know why? You know why?
Tell me, Biodun.
President Obasanjo came up to say, vice chancellors are now political appointees.
I am not a political appointee. I have always rejected it.
But you get political appointee salary. Certainly, you don't have your salary as a professor.
I attended an interview. I came first.
Oh, get my point. That is the way you are classified. That is the way your salary is classified.
Did not influence it. That's what we do have.
Let me use the moderator intervention so that this does not become a debate between two people. But I'm grateful to the two of you because in the intensity, great facts came out, great ideas came out. President Ogunyemi, when the Vice Chancellor said he could run online and do exam online, why did ASUU oppose that?
Can I answer?
Yes, please. It's for you. The question is for you.
ASUU did not oppose that. What ASUU said was the basic infrastructure was not there. Go to campuses now. They are now rushing to put optic fiber. We know what happened in other times where students wrote exam online, had lectures online. Lecturers' data plans were subsidized. Students were even supported with laptops and so on. I know of my friend in South Africa, for instance, who witnessed that scenario. So we are saying that some things must be in place before we can be talking about it. I don't want to talk of Uni Osun, because if I go to the story of Uni Osun, it will look too personal. I'm just trying to protect my dear friend because we are connected through Professor Onido. I have to protect him as much as possible. But I know what happened in Uni Osun cannot actually be taken as a model for Nigeria.
Well, Prof, if I can just make a comment along that line, let's be specific. We organized the first ever online matriculation in this country. My union said it was a charade. It was even in the newspapers. Now everybody is doing it. We organized the first online convocation in any Nigerian public university. My union condemned it. Now everybody is doing it. That's the question Professor Toyin Falola is asking. That's the question he's asking. Why was it condemned? It happened. It's not as if we were just planning it. We did it.
This debate.
Prof, do I have the floor?
Yes, I guess so.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask Prof a question. In an online matriculation, why should students come to the campus to buy or to borrow and rent gowns?
Because they have to be properly kitted.
The amounts they were charged, properly kitted, at what cost? You see, it is not this thing that that will give you the quality education we are looking for. What Prof was doing in Uni Osun actually was to spite us during the strike. Pure and simple.
Interesting.
Yes, it was intentional. I must be frank with you. And he falls under the categories or under the category of vice chancellors we have come to label as free riders. People who are not ready to sacrifice anything, but they are ready to derive maximum benefit from other people's efforts. They thought they are doing that, stabbing us in the back. Then they are coming forward. You recall I wrote you a letter the last time. You broke our strike, and you still came to collect what accrued from the strike action.
I beg your pardon. It's not ASUU's money. It's taxpayers' money. And
it's not ASUU's money.
Strike.
It's not ASUU money.
Okay.
Not ASUU money. But if there was no strike, you wouldn't have gotten that money.
Okay.
Moderator, I think you should take over. Moderator, take over.
Yeah. Vice Chancellor and President.
Thank you.
It's an exciting conversation, bringing out differences and issues, which we are going to continue, and opinions will be divided. In setting up this panel, the way we structured it is producing the effect we desire. People with contrary opinions, people with different opinions and people who agree. So in this disagreement, this has been a very, very successful session. Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, for coming. And I want to invite the last person to interview, Professor Olatunde Babawale. Professor Babawale used to be the director of CBAC, and he went to Ife, where he did so well, becoming a university scholar, got a grant in the department as the best graduate overall performance in the Department of International Relations. The time when it was international relations, 1983 to 84, that department was actually one of the best in the continent. Under the leadership of great scholars, Ojo, Aluko. I remember those periods with nostalgia because the international department was hosting international conferences, very well attended. I was part of that program, Timothy Shaw and others, so many people coming from abroad with hosting great conferences. And people who were there then later distinguished themselves, including Gidi Oweye, who went ahead to establish his own university, Leeds City University. So we appreciate this pedigree. And thereafter, Professor Babawale became a professor of political economy. He joined CBAC, where his directorship renewed, energized the place. He organized major conferences, including one in Brazil that I attended. He hosted TOFAC, which was very well attended. And together with UNESCO, I collaborated with him to do a major conference in Calabar, which was one of the UNESCO's biggest conference on culture and slavery ever held. So we cannot thank him enough. He served as the Dean of Student Affairs. And it is in this capacity as Deans of Student Affairs that he came highly recommended, combining his questions will combine the role of a professor, deanship of students, and an administrator. So welcome, Professor Babawale. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Falola, for inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity of being on this platform. I'd also like to thank Professor Ogunyemi for his leadership. Let me go straight to my question. I hope I'm clear enough.
Yes.
Okay. Professor Ogunyemi, you have talked extensively about the role played in the renewal of the infrastructure of universities by TED Fund. I know that TED Fund was an initiative of ASUU. It was the idea, it was ASUU's idea that gave birth to TED Fund. I remember I was secretary of the UNILAG branch of ASUU in those days. That agency has contributed to the resuscitation of our universities. But my question, Prof, what is ASUU doing to call attention to companies that default in the payment of this tax that produce TED Fund? And secondly, how do you intend as a union to raise your advocacy to ensure that we bring into the tax net those companies that have not been participating or paying into TED Fund? That's my first question.
Thank you very much, Prof. The TED Fund as an agency has undergone many phases. You will recall that in the first 5 years or so, we were struggling to even make TED Fund operational. The stories around the pioneer executive secretary, late Mrs. Olakuni, actually engaged the attention of our union for a long time. And well, government was hesitant to accept that some funds were missing, but subsequently, government now started activating said fund operation. Concerning what we are doing to ensure that that fund collects all that is collectible, if that expression is permitted. We are trying to engage that fund as an agency. Recall that before, until 2011, we were on the board. We were on the governing board of TED Fund. By 2011, they reviewed the law, the act, and they removed us. Now they are saying representative of tertiary institutions. Who is a representative of tertiary institution? That is why that seat is vacant on the governing board till tomorrow. So we are now struggling to go back to that board because that is where the decisions are made. However, we also explored another avenue when they came up with impact assessment last year, or no, late 2019. We were part of the team that went around universities to assess the impact of TED Fund as an intervention agency on our campuses, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. I was supposed to be part of the team that will engage the Federal Inland Revenue Service in order to track what they collected and the total amount. Lo and behold, we were faced with an impenetrable brick wall. After several visits, we had to give up. But I can tell you now that we have gone back to our lawyer, and very soon, Femi Falana may have to assist us with the Freedom of Information, under the Freedom of Information Act, to ask what do they call it, Federal Inland Revenue Service, to provide detailed information. Pardon?
Quiet.
So that we can actually track what has been happening, and we can know where to engage appropriate government agencies on this matter. So I agree with you that we cannot vouch for what has been collected. We cannot vouch for correct application, and we can also not vouch for the monitoring of projects. But concerning the monitoring of the project, if there was any intervention we did last year or 2019, again, it was in the area of this budget monitoring and project monitoring committees. We felt that campus-based unions should play more active roles, including student unions. Students are the end users of most of these facilities: hostels, lecture rooms, lecture theaters, studios, laboratories. So we are now insisting that TED Fund should operate a more open system, such that to monitor this, to monitor operations or applications of TED Fund grants will be seamless. But let me give to TED Fund. TED Fund has been accommodated to, they have been accommodating to ASUU perspective on most of these issues. I want to give that to the current leadership of TED Fund. So I will say that we are having positive engagement with TED Fund on how to reposition the agency to deliver maximally on its mandate.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that informative and enlightening response. I once served as Dean of Student Affairs at the University of Lagos, and I did get some complaints about us. That I'm talking about we teachers. And it is often said that a good reformer must first of all reform himself. What is ASUU as a union doing to collaborate with university management to ensure that we as university teachers do our job as expected, to wit, attend classes regularly and punctually, grade our scripts within set deadlines, and be above board in our duties and relationship with students? What is ASUU doing in this regard, Mr. President?
Thank you so much, Prof. Well, you are also a comrade, and you know some of these things we have been saying. If anything at all, we are more critical about ourselves than even others. But addressing your questions is a loaded one. It's a loaded question. It's a question with many questions. I will not deny that there are infractions. I will not deny that some of our colleagues are performing below expectations. But I also want us to situate the problem correctly. For instance, what is the size of the student population we are talking about? A colleague in one of the universities, head of department, recently complained to me. He taught a class of over 500 students, and he had this pile of scripts to mark, and he was given 1 week. Failure to deliver, he will be lined up for disciplinary action. Is that fair to that colleague? I know in our days, the entire faculty may not even be more than 200. But now a department is having 500 students. When they get to final year, you may be given 20 students to supervise as undergraduate projects. Nowadays, we are just 2 or 3 to our supervisor. That same lecturer who have like 10 master students and who have like 8 or 7 PhD students. All of those activities are supposed to be happening simultaneously. You supervise, you teach, you supervise, you grade, and you still have to do your research. The point I'm making here is, I'm not defending any lecturer that there is, but I'm saying that increasingly, the workload of our members is becoming overwhelming, could be overwhelming. And under such circumstances, enforcement of regulations become difficult. Enforcement of regulations becomes difficult. And that is why in that university that I told you about, the HOD had to tell Mr. Vice Chancellor, we have seen this your directive, but it cannot work. My department, nobody will submit within this your deadline. So when you start doing that, it will look like an affront. It's like you are undermining the authority of the Vice Chancellor. But why should the Vice Chancellor, in the first place, come up with an unworkable directive, an unrealistic policy? So as for our colleagues who are not doing the correct thing, they are there. But that takes me back to what I said earlier about the recruitment process. Are we still attracting the best and the brightest? How are some of these people getting into the system? Like when Tosi asked me about misconduct, sexual harassment, and so on and so forth. When you see people who have passion for this work, they will stand out from the crowd. And you can be sure that they will deliver. However, where things cannot work, they will also not hesitate to make it known. And that is where our union comes into it. Where we have challenges that are real, we try to articulate. We try to work with the vice chancellors to review policies, work with vice chancellors to even discipline our members who are erring. I know every university has union members, union representatives on their disciplinary committees. So we are part of the system. We are doing our best, and there is no meeting of ASUU that we have had lately that we don't talk about the state of our union. What do we discuss under the state of our union? We discuss ethical issues. And like the sister's wife, we always remind ourselves we must live above suspicion. So we are conscious of our place in history, and we are conscious of our role in the system. So we do our best to live up to the expectations.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that some of these things that you talked about have been done. What one is saying is that regardless of the obstacles put in our way by the increasing number of students, even our colleagues know colleagues who rarely, hardly do their jobs as expected. There are graduate classes where you don't have, which are not necessarily large, and yet some still fail to return the scripts for exams on time, regardless. So this is why there is a need for us to do more in that regard, in our collective interest. Having said that, I'd like to ask you, sir, you have alluded to some of the things ASUU has been doing in the area of having a budget monitoring committee, which I see as a recent creation, more or less. I would now like to ask Mr. President, what is ASUU's mechanism, an institutionalized mechanism or strategy for beaming the satellite on management of funds by university authorities? The BMC is situation specific, if I am right to think that way. But what other institutionalized mechanism have we put in place? Funds are provided for the universities, and ASUU then takes a back seat. And then there are problems with how those funds are applied, the priority of university administrators. How do we ensure that the right priorities are put in place when funds are made available? For instance, what do we do about overpricing of contract, which someone alluded to earlier in our public universities? Mr. President.
Thank you very much. That issue speaks to the role and responsibilities of BMC. Our conception of BMC is such that BMC will be part of the process of prioritizing projects in the first place. And I illustrate with the example of revitalization fund that goes to university or the universities once in a while. Before a university can access the revitalization fund, the BMC is expected to meet and identify areas of need. The areas of need will be a collection of submissions and prioritization from the units and departments of the universities through the faculties and colleges to the Central Budget Monitoring Committee, where all staff unions, including student union, will be represented. At that level, they are part of the conception of the projects. They own the projects. If they own the projects, then it means that the contracting process, they will be part of it. The pricing, the bidding, and so on and so forth, including the award, they are supposed to be part of it. And that was why I was appealing to vice chancellors earlier. that they should make BMCs work. Look, I went to 12 universities between last month and early this month. And I found that in more than 10 universities, in about 10 universities, BMCs were rendered moribund. I saw a university where the vice chancellor, who is the chairman of Tenders Board, is not the chairman of BMC. I had to tell this honorable vice chancellor that this is an infraction. See the guidelines. The guidelines stipulate that an external council will chair the BMC, and you have no rule. Since you are going to chair the Tenders Board, so who do you report to as a BMC? And that is what happens everywhere, or in most places. It was just in about 2 or 3 universities that we were able to see the ideal BMC in operation. Because what we do when we monitor like that, we will leave the vice chancellor. We go and meet members of the BMC without the representation of the vice chancellor or the vice chancellor himself being present. So we have a way of tracking some of these things. And on every campus, let me add this, we have ASUU's BMC. The ASUU's BMC it operates independent of vice chancellors, except where the vice chancellor has succeeded in planting his or her agent as a mole in the union, and they are able to hijack ASUU's BMC. So the ASUU's BMC operates like our spy. And just like I was telling my good brother earlier, that if we get advance report from ASUU's BMC, we will go there and raise questions when they come to defend their projects next time around. So we try to put that line of checks and balances as a way of monitoring. It is something that we thought should be applied also to third form projects, as well as university-wide projects. The vice chancellors are trying to circumscribe. They are trying to limit their operation just to this assessment, because they know that is where access to the next round of intervention will be contingent upon. It will be contingent on effectiveness or the positive report we get from BMC. We do that as much as possible, but we have also flagged projects that we had reasons to suspect were corruptly implemented on campuses, and we had documentations on such projects. And I mentioned earlier cases of our colleagues, chairpersons of the union, who were sent back from their job because they raised alarm. So well, people might think we're not doing enough, but even the little we are doing, we are being persecuted in many cases.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I add this follow-up question? ASUU historically has been engaged in several struggles, and your own leadership has been part of that historical struggle. In what ways, Mr. President, can you say that the struggles of ASUU under your leadership as Professor Biodun Ogunyemi have been substantially different in form and content from those of your predecessors?
I think we should start from the context. When Jega was president, how many branches did we have? Maybe just about 20 or thereabouts.
Yes.
We moved from there. Yes, we moved from there. Our branches became 40, later became 60. Today we have 7 branches. So the dynamics of increase in itself presents a different challenge. So it's like every leader of ASUU, every president of ASUU will have to operate in a different context. Again, the context of the military is different from the context of civilian. Today, the government will say, well, we cannot do something until we go to the National Assembly. You get to the National Assembly, they are dribbling you. And you know what it takes to pull through any proposal at the National Assembly. I don't want to talk of what goes on behind the curtains, but I can only say that because we are operating in a different context, there are new challenges that are coming up. I tell you, it is almost every day that we have a new crisis emerging from at least one campus or the other. Just last Friday, in Ekiti, the governing council said they have proscribed ASUU, another union, at Ekiti State University. I mean, that's not happening for the first time. And I know those who have extreme views and disaffection for the union will jump at that it serves them right. And what are they protesting about? They have not paid them for them, and they have been on our salary for some 8 months. They're asking them, pay us arrears of our salaries. Is that too much to ask? And you say, because they are in a setting we call a democracy, and so they are outlawed. It's a different challenge. Before them, Kogi State government came out to say he outlawed ASUU, and he even read it. He said they have formulated a policy, a law that outlawed ASUU, that banished ASUU from Kogi State University. But you see what some of these overseers, administrators, and politicians, what they fail to understand is that they cannot ban ASUU. As you are well aware, ASUU is an idea. You cannot kill it. That is at the philosophical level. ASUU is an idea. They cannot kill it. Abacha tried it. Babangida tried it. In fact, at some point, they had to negotiate with the union they banned. So if any vice chancellor or any state governor thinks by proclaiming that they have banned a union, that union stands banned, I think it's just it's a wild goose chase. It will not land them anywhere. But talking more fundamentally, legally, there is no branch of ASUU that is ASUU. ASUU is centrally chartered.
Yeah, that's true.
So we only have branches. So you cannot say you outlawed ASUU. You can't, as long as the charter subsists.
It's affiliated.
So it shows you how limited they are in their understanding of trade union. But the goal they want to achieve really is to cow opposition. You know, we now have a new set of politicians or political actors who are intolerant of critical engagement. And it's unfortunate. In fact, I'm tempted to say that I cannot differentiate between the civil politicians and the khaki politicians, civilian politicians and khaki politicians. So, because they operate more or less like the same. Go to any state governor today, it is what he wants, or well, we don't have a female governor yet. It is what he wants that the State House of Assembly must do. And that is why they are compounding our problems, even in the academia. A governor that has not funded a university will make it 2, will make it 3, will even make it 4. When Okorocha was going to leave Imo State, in one fell swoop, He claimed to have created 4 universities. Is that what we need in Nigeria? If you go to National Assembly today, they have more than 180 bills pending for the establishment of tertiary institutions. And you find that every senator wants a federal university in their constituency. And as I used to say, it appears they have turned the establishment of universities to constituency projects. The only thing they can take back to their constituency. Whereas they will create these universities, they will not take steps to fund them. And before you know it, those new universities will become crisis centers, and they will debase the foundation of intellectual development. So it's unfortunate. And so these are some of the dynamics that are playing out as we move on in the Nigerian environment, and the intellectual ecology that we think should evolve over time has been debased, and we are almost getting disillusioned. It's unfortunate.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the very deep response that you have given. I'd like to ask my last question, and that goes to the fact that sooner or later, your tenure will come to an end. However, yes, I would like to know what the leadership of the union that you currently superintend over, what does it intend to do to make the achievements you have recorded during this tenure enduring, sustainable, and irreversible by these and possibly successive governments?
I don't want to talk of any achievements because we operate collective leadership. As you know, no president of ASUU can say I've achieved anything. It is NDC that will give you the template, the template that will guide you as you are going to the office, and you report to NEC from time to time, and NEC gives you ideas on what to do. But what I can say is that ASUU has continued to evolve, and our achievements are cumulative. They are cumulative because you are building on what somebody else has done, and somebody else will come to build on what you have done. But the only thing we can say is that as the accumulation process continues, there are documentation along the line. For instance, I inherited the Memorandum of Understanding of 2013, which the preceding set of national officers secured. I was vice president then. Comrade Nasir Fage was the president. Together, that set of leaders got out that memorandum. It was a great asset because it became, it became a reference point, and today it's still a reference point. So it has become our reference point when we talk of needs assessment. The previous set of leaders before the one we had between 2012 and 2016, they conducted the needs assessment. So today we make reference to needs assessment. We make reference to MOU of 2013. And even this assessment itself evolved from 2009 agreement, to which Sule Kano and the person that took over from him made substantial contribution. So our achievements in this union have been cumulative, and we operate intergenerational transition in a way such that as one generation is going, the next one is building on what they have done. What I can only say is that today we can say we have a new agreement, 2020, which has as component elements of Memorandum of Understanding 2013, which had as its foundation the initial assessment of 2012. And the foundation for that was the FGN-ASUU agreement of 2009. So you can trace the genealogy, if you like, back to many, many years, just as you are going on. So any leader of ASUU that is emerging, you must be conscious of that progression. And you don't want to lower the bar. Rather, you want to keep the flag up. So far, what we have done, I'm talking of my set of POs, we have tracked what we had as outstanding within the previous efforts. And we had also tried to push the frontiers, just as we're about concluding another FGN-ASUU agreement. We hope we'll be able to conclude that before I go, such that we can have what we can call FGN-ASUU agreement of 2021. And that is where the issues of condition of service, the issue of funding, the issue of academic freedom and university autonomy, as well as other issues related to law and regulations will be clearly outlined and tried. So whoever is coming up after me, together with his or her team, will have to work with that document, and they will be guided by the appropriate organs of the union. That is the way we work in the union, and I believe you also know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I must thank you for the responses and thank the moderator. I'd like to hand over at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Babawale, and the takeaway on continuity and legacies. So it's time now to throw it open for members of the audience. We've received some questions beforehand. We have many people are here who want to ask questions. We will give privilege to those who are here. And if there's time, we will draw from our data bank. So I can see for now, I saw somebody. Oh, Professor Akala, somebody. Okay, go ahead, Professor Akala, ask your question. From Howard University. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Ogunyemi, for your responses. It appears the Union Vice Chancellor read my mind. He had alluded to the question that I have in mind. The question is this: is ASUU aware of the image of Nigerian University abroad, and that Nigerian University graduates have been denied admission to highly competitive programs in USA and other advanced countries because of incessant close down? I'm sure you are a product of Nigerian universities between 1970 to early 1990s. I can speak of the Faculty of Pharmacy at Ife. If Faculty of Pharmacy awarded a dog a B.Pharm degree, that between 1970 and 1990, that dog would be offered admission to the best university in Europe and US. That is not the case now. I am a professor at Howard University. I know the question they asked, that how many years did our students actually spend in the classroom before they get their degree? There should be an alternative to closing down the university. That issue should be addressed seriously. It's affecting our image. When our students apply, they don't even talk of giving them scholarship any longer because they are not sure of what they are trying to fund. If you want to respond, fine, but if not, I think that issue should be taken seriously.
Thank you. President, please.
All right, thank you, Professor Akala. I thought I addressed this issue earlier, but maybe I was not clear enough. What you said also worries us. And that's why I was talking about repositioning our universities for global competitiveness. Yes, your illustration about what obtained in the 70s and 80s is not new to us. But the question is, can we ever go back to that position, that status, where our degrees will be respected? Because what you are talking about here is not just about the closure of the universities. I gave you the example, if you were with me when I started, I gave the example of a first generation university where they were using kerosene stove in place of Bunsen burner. Would you recommend that for anybody? You would recommend for your colleague in Europe or America to go to that first generation university and use their laboratory? Where taps in chemistry lab had no water. I was there. And if I have your email, I can send you the needs assessment report. These things we are saying, they are not figments of our imagination. They are concrete realities of our debasement. So our colleagues in diaspora, they need to sit back and think of the way they can help us. Maybe I didn't make that clear enough. They too should intervene in this matter. They too should tell Nigerian government that this cannot continue like this. Thank goodness, we are beginning to see some reversal. And I assure you, we don't enjoy strike action. We don't. Look, during this last strike action, I have 2 children, my own biological children at home. I had them who were on my neck. I had to sit them down, time for, regularly to make them understand why we were forced into it. I just gave the example of medical doctors. Until the medical doctors went on strike, they threatened them with no work, no pay. Government did not do what they ought to have done. If our government are sufficiently responsive and responsible, we will not be where we are. We know of our other colleagues in diaspora who have become the change agents in their countries. Maybe our colleagues in diaspora should also be thinking of how to help our universities. Not necessarily bringing money into the system, of course, influencing policies, telling them the impact of the neglect they have unleashed on our system. So when you say this, it's like you are blaming the victims. It's like you are telling us that we should not cry when they beat us because we are pressed to the wall. We don't like it. Nobody enjoys it. As president of ASUU, I will spend 48 hours not sleeping because of strike. It's injurious to my health. It's injurious to, let me tell you today, there is no president of ASUU, no past president of ASUU that does not have one health issue or the other because of this level of efforts they have made on this matter. So it is personally injurious to us. It is also collectively injurious to the system and nation. As you are feeling the pang, we are also feeling it, I would say, even far, far more than any other person. We don't enjoy going on strike. We are forced into going on strike. I must confess to you. If anybody can help us, let them come and help us. If they have ideas that will make strike to be consigned to the rubbish heap of history, we will embrace it. But we are still waiting for those ideas. We are still waiting for those efforts that will change the tide. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Da Silva, University of Ibadan. Professor Da Silva, University of Ibadan. Professor Da Silva, yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Or can I be heard now?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah.
We can
Thank
hear
you very much. My name is Ademola Omombewaji Da Silva, University of Ibadan, Nigeria. My comment, remark, and questions are all rolled into one and revolve around the recurring issue of the university autonomy, the problem of general accountability and financial recklessness on the part of many vice chancellors and their management, and the unhealthy activism of some ASUU branch EXCO members who support these vice chancellors, to which I would like the president to react. No doubt the president and Professor Labode Popola Unioshon, vice chancellor, and later Professor Tunde Babawale had dwelt largely on this earlier on. But it remains inconclusive. Sir, one of the key issues that repeatedly caused ASUU strike has been inadequate funding of the public universities. Unfortunately, in recent times, critics of ASUU tend to find ASUU demand for adequate funding unjustifiable because many of the universities could not account for the funds internally generated or funds that are made available to them through government agencies like TED Fund. A couple of months ago, TED Fund released a list of public universities that failed to account fully for funds released to them. And for their failure, TED Fund denied the defaulting universities access to additional or further funding. So how come ASUU blame federal government for inadequate funding when the funds many public universities have access to, they mismanage? Again, it's a common knowledge that while ASUU strive for adequate funding to address the challenges of infrastructure deficit, poorly equipped laboratories and classrooms, among others in our public universities, in recent times, some vice chancellors have been accused of brazen financial recklessness, unfortunately, backed by some ASUU branch EXCO members because they are direct beneficiaries. For instance, some vice chancellors could afford to buy for their official use a single car that was worth more than 50 million and more additional official cars for the different unit heads costing between 20 million and 30 million for each car. And on top of that, some actually embarked on curious projects like refurbishment of principal officers' staff quarters, each at scandalous amount, especially at this austere time. Unfortunately, the same universities complain of lack of well-equipped laboratories. Their classrooms have become an eyesore. The universities could not even pay honorarium to lecturers who taught special programs. Sir, that is a fundamental disconnect between ASUU's sincere struggle and advocacy for adequate funding for public universities on the one hand, and the curious priorities of many of the vice chancellors and their management on the other hand. The president mentioned a proposed PMC, but of what use when the corrupt vice chancellors are also backed and supported by some ASUU branch EXCO members? Your reaction, please, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Your questions are truly loaded. Well, let me try to disentangle them. Let me see if I can capture every bit of your loaded question. I will start from the rear, if I got that right, that we ask for BMCs, but some BMCs are made up of surrogates of vice chancellors. Well, if that is allowed to stay, then you won't just blame ASUU national leadership for that. We have other organs of the universities that are supposed to be critical stakeholders in some of these processes and procedures. We know, for instance, that ASUU leaders, ASUU officials in branches are elected, and the Congress of every branch has the power to change any leader that is suspected to have soiled his or her hand. Maybe we are not watchful enough, maybe we are not pushful enough, or maybe we don't have clear understanding of the workings of the union. But if our branches are sufficiently knowledgeable of the powers that they have, they will not watch helplessly as some leaders are positioning themselves for privileges and perquisites. Because that is what I see as the bottom of your allegations. And it borders, the whole of this borders on opportunism, which Professor Popola tried to allude to earlier. We are all products of, or we are all students of checks and balances. And if we are critical enough, we can put pressure to bear. We can put pressure, sufficient pressure, that will lead to the change that we desire. So we have also put on various layers to track some of these things on campuses. If, for instance, there are problems that cannot be handled by a branch, and they are taken to the zone, and zone cannot handle, such problems will be brought to the national. So of these things, there was nowhere we heard about them that we don't take steps to intervene. So if Prof is saying that he's aware of some of these cases of opportunism, we will advise that we should find as much as possible space to pass them to the appropriate quarters. Yes, some vice chancellors have been accused of financial recklessness, and ASUU leaders are beneficiaries. It's still the same thing about, it still boils down to this opportunism that we're talking about. We, at national, or as national leaders of the union, we do not act on the information that we don't have. I want to assure Prof that if we have sufficient information and incontrovertible evidence against any local leader of our union, we have sufficient mechanism for redressing any anomaly in any branch. So let us also do diligence. Let's do our diligent work and ensure that those who are probably exploiting the opportunity to serve in our union are not allowed to go scot-free. Well, many universities are unaccountable, and that fund has declared some universities, that fund has denied some universities access to the new fund. It still boils down to what we were saying earlier. If the BMC is working, if vice chancellors are not breathing down the neck of that organ, we see no reason why corruptive practices will not have been flagged before then. But I want to underline this point. BMC is currently being resisted for TED fund because they say it was not part of their guideline. So if they say it's not part of their guidelines, it will be difficult for us to push. And that was why I said earlier, if we can find our way back to the board, then I believe we should be in a better position to influence some of the policies that are coming out of TED. So, Prof, in totality, I would say that I saw your contributions as a wake-up call and a way of alerting us as critical stakeholders to be more watchful and to think of innovative ways by which we can apprehend some of the instances that are putting us in bad light as a union of progressive intellectuals. We have been talking, so we'll continue to talk along that line. So we appreciate your contribution. Thank you.
Professor Olorode. Professor Olorode. Please, can you?
He needs to unmute himself.
Can you unmute yourself? Can you unmute? You have to unmute. Can you unmute?
I can.
Well,
I try.
Prof, unmute yourself.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. And happy birthday. He's 80 years old this week. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Yes, sir.
Please let me go to this business. You see, the way people are addressing this matter, it's like they think that the crisis in the Nigerian university dropped on us yesterday. And somehow they also think that universities will survive in a country that is crumbling or that has crumbled. The gentleman who talked about drugs in 1970 being better, being able to get admission. So drugs in 1978 are better than lecturers now, right? That is what people are telling some of us. No, it up yesterday. In 1984, our government was driving doctors from Lagos to Ife to everywhere because they said there are no hospitals. As we are talking now, COVID-19 is severe, or even more severe, as in some places. Our universities cannot open. No schools can open in Nigeria if COVID-19 was even. And so people should not go and see the situation in Nigeria just dropped on us yesterday. Universities are victims of the crisis of Nigerian politics. So when people talk about science and how whatever, so what do you understand the university? We have no government. If they think ASUU struggle is too much, they should close down the Nigerian university. So vice chancellors who are appointees, political appointees of irresponsible government are also telling us the same things that government is telling us. The man from Osogbo was saying that there is enough money in the university system. Yes, there's some money in the university system, but the budget of education has never been as low as it is today. Just about 6% of the national budget. The National Assembly is spending more money than Nigerian university system. As for co-funding, Prof. Ogunyemi already made it. Nigerian parents are already overburdened. If the man from ASUU does not do, they are unpaid, working parents, they are unpaid in many government institutions, including ASUU, pensioners are not paid. Universities are not in LAUTECH. Government is owing them 7 months. In fact, nobody is paying 30,000 naira minimum wage. It's 6,000 naira a month is the wage they are paying. Only half salary. When you say proliferation of universities in ASUU state, with one university, there are 6 campuses about 4 years ago, and we recommended that government should reduce the number of senatorial districts. They not us. Okay, all the states. They cannot run single universities. They are more universities. They're able to train more lecturers to teach, and so on and so forth. NUC licensed 20 universities in the last 2 weeks or so. And so when the Vice Chancellor of ASUU says parents can pay, ASUU president already said, who are the parents who can pay? Look, there are so many universities in Nigeria now, and only 4% of the students that are enrolled in universities are in private universities. There are more private universities now than public universities. Now, why is it only 4% that go there? In spite of all the propaganda about how more efficient, why is it that they cannot attract students? Simple. Parents cannot afford to go to university or privatize university. As for activism, being a substitute for hard work, we challenge the people who are peddling that to say which of the ASUU activists are not doing their work. The best lecturers in the Nigerian universities are activists. Okay? And you can go and check. Let's go see Asisi Aso, Biodun Ogunyemi, name them, Tuku, Bala Usman, Segun Osoba in Ife. Who are these people who are saying lazy people who are activists? These are people who take ASUU's commitment seriously. And people who say they are ASUU members, who have not committed apostasy, to go and look at ASUU's constitution and see what ASUU says about commitment of intellectuals to the Nigerian people. And the centerpiece of that commitment is that universities will not survive in a country that itself does not survive. As for corruption, government creates corruption and creates people in universities who are going to be corrupt. Most of the time, the 2 people who blow whistles that get punished for corruption in the university system. In Ilorin in 2001, the letter there under ASUU accused the university authorities of corrupt management of university resources. Obasanjo said the visitation panel and indicted the council and the vice chancellor and dismissed the council, but retained the vice chancellor who is alleged executive. What did the University of Ilorin do? They sacked 49 plus lecturers for 8 years. It was the Supreme Court that reinstated them. And so people read this. And the political context in which ASUU struggle has developed. And I want to conclude. ASUU is a democratic organization. There are no organization that is not democratic. can have their boss. They cannot impose their on the union. The guy will let you go back to Ibadan contest the election. Instead of doing business in Osun State, if you go back and pass this voice, there are other ways from that. Thank you, Comrade Moderator.
Thank you, sir. Because we have many people, you don't have to respond because it was making so many comments. Temitope Maba, I couldn't get full name. Thank you, sir, Professor Lori, and happy birthday once again. Temitope, please. Temitope. Temitope, you raise your hand. Okay, let me pass you then. Kazim. Kazim. Please go ahead, sir. Kazim. You are raising your hands, but we couldn't locate you. Mubarak? Okay, please. Be brief, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Mubarak Ojewale from Sister Research Center for Real-Time and Embedded System Computing in Portugal.
Far away from Portugal.
Yes. So thank you very much, Professor Ogunyemi and Professor Pupola, for the wonderful discussion about the Nigerian education system. My question contribution is that when a nation has a problem that is becoming almost unsolvable, they turn to the academia, they turn to the universities for solution. So now when the universities are having a recurring problem themselves, then we have to look inwards. The solution is always in intellectual activities. So what I'm driving at is we have been facing the problem of a funding model that works for universities for over 30 or 40 decades now. So I want to say that we should, as part of the contribution that other speakers have said, I think we need to start shifting our mind away from strikes, or even if we will go on strike, probably we should change the points that we will want to go on strike for. Why not ASUU, which represents the body of Nigerian intellectuals, which has a lot of professors in economics, in education management, education funding, come up with a model, a funding model, probably a public-private partnership. Clearly, the government is failing in funding education, and it seems that it is reasonable to assume that the Nigerian government cannot fund education enough. So why not look for a model where the government plays a part, maybe just 30%, and private individuals, endowments, parent participation. We should just create, I want to believe that it is not possible and it is not beyond the capacity of the Nigerian intellectuals to come up with a funding model that is sustainable, independent of government's mismanagement or shocks, and that keeps the universities open for 12 months in a year. So my contribution question is that for ASUU, is it possible that we come up with a funding model that is immune to government's paucity of funds and also workable given the Nigerian socio-economic situation? And now we put this model on the table with the National Assembly and the government, that we want this as the model in which the universities will work. We can go one last final strike to make sure, okay, they adopt this model, and we know that we are home and dry. So I put this challenge to ASUU, that we come up with a model that does not rely on asking government for what they either do not have or they will never give. We've tried strike for over 3 decades. It has not worked. So can we come up with a model that is sustainable and is holistic, that solves this once and for all? Thank you.
Thank you, Mubarak. Please, Mr. President, hold on, take more questions so you rest a little bit. Majid Alabi, please. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for giving us this opportunity. Good evening, Mr. President, Professor Ogunyemi, and on our own side too, I say happy birthday to Professor Motoyo Olorode, our forerunner. My question is very simple, and I'll go straight to my question. I know on several occasions I've had this opportunity to raise these questions with Professor Ogunyemi, but I'm taking this opportunity now to table it again, that ASUU does not exist in a vacuum. ASUU exists as part and parcel of Nigeria. So ASUU as a body is also not immune to the challenges that confront Nigeria as a country. But more importantly, is the fact that as a union that has organs to address relevant issues, particularly when it comes to, I know you have a body, you have an organ called Ethics Committee. But surprisingly, we have members of ASUU who are lecturers and who are found wanting in one way or the other. And I'm going to be very specific. Last year in 2020, February, I reported the allegation leveled by TED Fund that ASUU members, that Nigerian lecturers are diverting research funds to build houses, to buy cars. And we have cases of members of ASUU across various campuses who had opportunity to get scholarship from ASUU, probably to go to UK. But rather than going to UK or going to any other European country, what they do is that they go to Ghana or they go to Benin Republic without telling the funder. But we have never seen a case where ASUU has been able to come up and say, this is the punishment or this is the matter we are in. And ASUU cannot say it is not aware of these very serious allegations. And I am sorry that I'm bringing this up again. Last year, I was blacklisted by ASUU for reporting this. And the director of research and development of TED Fund, who made this allegation, backed by evidence, which I also sought, and I got this evidence. TED Fund was almost blackmailed, forcing TED Fund to recant because they felt that as an individual, as a reporter, reporting that particular incident at that time was like supporting the federal government to clamp down on ASUU because it was against the IPPIS. Our challenge is that ASUU as a body of disciplined intellectuals, why has ASUU not come up with an open and transparent process of punishing members who are found wanting at one point or the other? We have also seen instances where schools want to punish members of the union who are found wanting. And what we see is a strong defense on the part of the union, believing that because some members are found wanting, it is because they are members of the union. Why? At what stage do we separate the union from individual crimes? Thank you very much, sir.
So thank you. We take two more. We'll let him respond later because the question from Mubarak is about strike and yours is about corruption, which have been previously covered. Kabiru, are you there? Kabiru Mohammed, please. We want to take two more. Kabiru Mohammed, please go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity. I have three questions to ask. One is about TED Fund. TED Fund, according to the responses my president gave, is one of the laudable achievements of ASUU, which we have seen. So in connection to the question raised by Mubarak, please, I just want to raise this as a challenge to ASUU. Now that we have a negotiation that is going on about our welfare and increase in our salaries, I know government will likely say that they don't have the resources due to the reality in our economic situation. So what can ASUU do to make as a suggestion for the government to source this funding? That is one. Number two, the president also responded to a question about private university now will likely take over public universities. I have had his response, but I am not satisfied because government may likely also use these private universities as an alternative for their children that used to go to abroad. Now that they have them in the country, they will likely give them all the support to function well and disregard funding of public universities, just like what happened in our other levels of education, primary and secondary school. The funding in primary and secondary school we know are nothing to write home about, and therefore nobody is ready to take his children there. So they may likely disregard the funding of the public universities because they know they don't have any business with it. They are not taking their children to the university, and therefore the private university may likely take over the public university. Then thirdly, sir, and the last one is about our senior colleagues who are members of this union. In several occasions, a senior colleague may have a chance to have their junior ones in terms of promotion, staff development, research, and so on. But instead of putting them through, give them the necessary guidance, they instead sabotage their effort. They don't give them mentorship as necessary. So what can ASUU do at this level to encourage mentorship? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can we take the last one from Tobialunge? Tobialunge, the last question, please. Sir, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the opportunity given to me. And I want to salute the president of ASUU so far for the interesting discussion and the engagement. My question very quickly is still on funding. I schooled in the University of Ibadan for my master's degree, and I spent less than 150,000-200,000 to complete the program as a then. And I consider coming over to the UK for further studies. I actually see the facility that's observable that we have here and the amount of pounds that goes into the tuition and likes. So I challenge my people back home that I will have done a program with 250,000 naira and get the master's degree and coming over here to spend all these thousands of pounds. So I'm considering that if we want to achieve this kind of level of education, what percentage can government do? And what is the percentage of parents that can help in funding? Like you said the other time, that we have to look at the parents in context, 30%, 70%. Can we truly have funding from the part of the parents to help revitalize our university system? So if we can have a kind of bracket or a kind of system that will help the parents who can really contribute or who can pay for this fund we are talking about to help government in terms of funding so that universities can get to where they are on the one part. And second question relates to the achievement of ASUU so far. I would say that in honest evaluation, my president, with due respect, can you give a percentage of the achievement of ASUU out of 100 or out of 10? How will you rate yourself in terms of your struggles with the government? If you're going on strike or demanding for a particular thing, could you say on the average you got 50, 60%, and remaining 40% you are still striving to achieve it? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Your questions are similar to those of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Popola. Last, we called him before, Mr. Temitope Fagwa. You were the very first I called, but we didn't hear you. So let me give you the final opportunity because you've been raising your hand for so long. Go ahead,
yes, Prof.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Prof. An apology. I think I had network issues, so I couldn't hear when I was called. Firstly, let me thank the organizers for coming up with this amazing initiative, and also to thank our president, Professor Ogunyemi, and also involved themselves in the conversations and so far. Quickly, I think that I think is quite important for us to to ask or is to say is that is it really possible for us to get orange juice out of mangoes? Because I think that's the right analogy, that can take us to a better place in understanding this phenomenon. Because really we think we can somehow have, amazingly, miraculously, we can have an efficient educational system without not necessarily struggling. It's quite important for us to make this point known, because when you go back to the history of some countries, for instance, that some of us today, such for instance, many of us do not really understand that teachers union in the country struggled for for decades to get what some of us are for instance, the National Educational Association and also the American Federation of Teachers, had a long history of struggle with the American state before they can get the dividends that that pervades that society today. So really, if we are coming up with a notion that we can somehow miraculously make a better educational system out of what we currently have, without not necessarily. But I think what we are really doing is to delay, the our children, the chances of, members of this society to get their due right, because it is important for us to also, state categorically that it is the right of the Nigerian state to educate our masses. I mean, what else, can you begin to pinpoint to the Nigerian state or the responsibility of the government in a country, if not to educate our citizens? I mean, go far to justify this position, but you just have to go back to the history of Africa itself. It used to be the responsibility of the, whatever state, to educate in whatever endeavors. Because if you have an army of you are really, as a society, and that is why this state, is in what it's in its current mess, because of insecurity, without not going back to the kind of the nature and character of our educational system. So I think that we should totally from what we can call a lazy man attempt at solving issues by saying that we can have an educational system, an efficient educational system by doors, to bring about some miracles, and I think that's the beauty of the position of Professor Olorode, because we really do not understand that all of these issues, emanate from justice, the attempt by the Nigerian state to commercialize the educational sector. It is quite unfortunate that sometimes ago, we had our Minister of Education, in a Obafemi Awolowo, declaring at that campus that the Nigerian have really seen much, that the attempt of the Nigerian government, this current government, is really to, to create more hostile statement itself in a university is on this government and also the minister himself. But apparent contradiction, because we look into for some of us, we've had relationship with some of the private universities we have down here, and this is not to embarrass anybody, But we know the rot is in this system. Instead of themselves as, next alternative and what have you, not begin to go into this rot. A situation where a the pro-chancellor of a university to declare that their intention when they were setting up the was not really for the love of education. Business men and all of that. Is that kind of situation? Is that the kind of situation we are really, alternative to the crisis that we have in the educational system at this time? I think that cannot be fair.
Well, thank you very much. Your system is not cooperating, but your points are clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Fagunwa. So, Mr. President, can you make your closing statements? You don't have to answer all the questions. You can weave your answers into your closing statements so that I don't call you again.
Very much.
Closing statements.
Thank you so much. We attempt to respond to some of the questions, perhaps in no particular order, but some of them are actually cross-cutting. So I will try to piece them together and make some remarks about them. Let me start with Toby Alonge. He tried to compare the cost of the master's program that he did in UI with the current amount of tuition he's paying in UK for his current studies. I would just ask him whether he also compared that experience with some other countries where he could have had his postgraduate still on scholarship. Germany, for instance. So that speaks to the fact that the idea of insisting that unless and until we pay tuition, we cannot make our education system run is not valid. The point ASUU is making is that it is about ideological. And when we say ideological, we are saying that it depends on how we have positioned education within the context of our developmental efforts or strive for development and transformation. For countries where they see education as the linchpin for bringing about a new society or sustaining their pace of development. You know, Germany, I think it has the fastest growing economy also in Europe. And it also depends on their assessment of what the people need to keep at the pace of maybe ethical standard, value formation, and the transformation in their society. So in other words, when you have a society that defines itself as striving towards achieving equity, for instance, equal opportunities, let's put it that way. It may be different from a society where you have a class society or a class orientation. So we still have, even in Europe, those societies where, some societies that have defined themselves as regulative. You know, we have what we can call social capitalism, and we have those we can also call chronic capitalism. So you need to differentiate the context we are talking about. Julius Nyerere once told us that unless we define the kind of society we are trying to build, we cannot design our education to meet our goals. what society are we building in Nigeria? It's a society that is without direction. It's a society where the rich will continue to get richer and the poor will remain poorer. I don't know how much of Nigeria you know, with due respect, but I can tell you that I've visited all the 36 in Nigeria in the course of my serving in the union, because our union has a policy. You must know Nigeria before you can intervene in Nigeria. Just within the last 4 weeks, I visited the Northeast, from Maiduguri to Damaturu, to Gashua, to Kashere, to Mubi, and so on and so forth. In Mubi, you need to visit the place. I visited the university that used to serve as the headquarters of Boko Haram. If you frighten students away from that system, what are you trying to do? I can tell you that the average ASUU leader strives to know Nigeria. And that is why when we comment about Nigeria, we are not just armchair critics. We can claim to know Nigeria. I traveled for 6-7 hours on roads that are pothole-ridden in the Northeast, and where you are watching your back because of the risk of being attacked. We've taken those risks in order for us to better know Nigeria. And those who are even ruling us, who are from that part of the country, they use helicopters to land in those places. And they abandon their people there. You need to see poverty walking on its leg. So we need to know the society we are talking about. Before you start comparing Nigeria to UK, you must define Nigeria. Which Nigeria are you talking about? Is it Nigeria of Lagos and Abuja? Or Nigeria of Damaturu, of Mubi, of Gashua? That I visited and I saw what obtains in those places without running down people from those places. But certainly, I've been to Northwest. I know what is happening. I've been to villages in every part, every nook and cranny of this country. When you remove the facade, when you remove the grandiose that you associate with the noise we make in cities and towns, you need to get to the villages to know what is happening. In rural areas in Nigeria, where over 60% or 70% of Nigerians still live, and you will see poverty walking on its feet, then you cannot come back and compare Nigeria with UK. There's no basis for comparison, my brother. Thank you very much. Now, my colleague Kabiru talked about mentorship. I also talked about private university as well as state fund. Yes, mentorship, I agree with you. Opportunities for mentorship are reducing or shrinking in Nigerian universities. But we also need to situate the problem correctly. We are all encumbered. And when I say we are all encumbered, I know what I'm saying. You want me to serve as mentor? If I tell you that we have professors who have been on the same salary structure or salary, maybe salary level for more than 15 years, our professors at bar, and nothing has been done to their welfare package. In 2009, when we signed the agreement with the federal government, the salary of a professor, maybe at 450 or so, would translate to about $3,000. Today, the salary of a professor is barely around $1,000. So which means he has been devalued 3 times along the line at least. Inflation, hyperinflation. So when I say we are encumbered in Nigeria, it takes extra efforts to be able to give attention to those that are coming behind you, because you two are struggling to make a living. So the challenges in our system are so enormous that they could overwhelm anybody who is not willing to go the extra mile to preserve the tradition. Nevertheless, we can do better. We can still improve on our processes or mechanisms for mentoring. What we are trying to do now, we're also trying to encourage that through what we call academic leadership. We have been holding some series of lectures or workshops on our campuses. We are developing academic culture. We are trying to develop academic culture. And we are working with our universities to also expand the scope for this engagement. Nevertheless, we will still insist that they should also attract to the system those who are mentorable. It's not impossible that we are attracting to the system now some individuals, some young colleagues that are not mentorable. Like I was discussing with Professor Bobola earlier, I was trying to make him realize that. And he also admitted that there are pressures. You know, political elites now, they want to impose even academics on the system. If you are a vice chancellor in a federal university, the moment you go to National Assembly to do one thing or the other, you will be handed a list of those you should employ. And the thing becomes a kind of rub my hand and I scratch your back. So all those intervening variables, they also dilute and pollute the system for us. And you only need to be careful so that you don't get the wrong person into your team. I think that is part of the problem. But we can do better. We try to improve on that. Well, you said private universities may overtake public universities. I cannot totally disagree with you, especially within the context that you have tried to explain it. That if they decide to channel government resources into private universities, before we know it, they will be getting subsidy and they'll be more attractive to candidates. One thing we saw that we saw a sign that pointed to that at some point recently. We were negotiating with a chairman of government who insisted that now we should go the way of education bank. And his concept of education bank is that the bank will pay the tuition of students in both private and public universities. And that the government, once government pays that, those in private universities, they will not have to worry about fees. We know that is a trap. ASUU will not, even if you put a gun at the head of an ASUU president, no ASUU president or ASUU leader will subscribe to that kind of view. And for that reason alone, we were held down for 3 years in our discussion about funding with government. How will you say that government should pay the tuition of students in private university? So, my comrade, Kabiru Muhammad, you are correct in your postulation that it is a possibility. I'm not disputing that, but what that tells us is that we have to be watchful. Another thing government agents or politicians have tried to do along that line is to surreptitious move towards channeling third fund resources into private universities. On a number of occasions, we stood against that process at the National Assembly. And let me shock you. Let me shock you on this matter. At one of our meetings at the National Assembly, we challenged members of that committee to declare their interests. Because before we got there, we had done our homework, and we found that at least 2 members of that committee had private universities. So we told them that there was conflict of interest. So if we had to discuss that matter, they have to step aside. But those were the people championing the cause that state fund support private universities. We stood against it because we cannot and we will not allow private universities to start accessing state fund grants that we fought for. We put our lives and energy to getting that fund established. So our members, the onus is on all of us who are members of ASUU, and of course other critical stakeholders, to stand up against private interests that are trying to corner resources from public funds to private investments. We don't know what profits they make in their universities, yet they want to access funds that are meant for public universities. We should not allow that to happen. Third fund is a laudable achievement, but a challenge. Government may say there is no fund. That is why we are engaging governments. That is why in our agreement with government, we are projecting into the resource needs for our university for the next 5 years. And we are telling government that if we want our university to continue progressively towards the point of our dream, that is repositioning our universities for global competitiveness, we must have a pattern of funding. We must have projection of funds that will go into the system. And if we do that and we do it conscientiously, at least if we cannot get everything, you should be able to get something regularly and periodically into the system. Yes, my good friend Moji Dalabi, I thank you for your intervention, and I didn't know this was really on your mind. I thought we had sorted out this issue. What we protested against was that there was a generalization that was not grounded in facts. I stand to be corrected. If you give out 100 grants, for instance, and 10% defaulted, it happens all over the world. You don't come out to generalize that Nigerian university lecturers are incapable of research, they don't have capacity for research, and that when they go out, or when they are given grants, they marry new wives, build houses in a way that was so derogatory and destructive to people's career progression. These people you are talking about have international scholars as their research partners and so on and so forth. When you come out to make those generalizations, you are not helping the system. To help the system, if you say some, for instance, fine. And you can go out to list them, provided you are sure of your facts, so that people don't take you to court. If you say we are protecting our members, I think it is an ethical issue. An accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty. We don't know how many of these people have been subjected to disciplinary procedures in their respective institutions. So if that fund is coming out, that fund will have to tell us that, well, out of X number, we have this Y number that defaulted, and so measures have been taken against them. If they are to take measures against them, and you now say ASUU stood on their way, you have to tell us that ASUU. Certainly, I've been involved at the national level at least for 9 years. 4 years, I was vice president. This is my 5th year. By next month, I'll be 5 years on the seat. In the last 9 years, I cannot point to a report that was brought to our attention. So if I come out to say, you don't have the right to paint all my members with a negative brush, to dismiss my members as incapable of thinking, to present my members as if they are predators. All they do is to look for comfort. I think I'm justified. I've been elected into this position to protect and defend the interests of my members, except where you have incontrovertible evidence against them on cases of either infractions against the system or misconduct that have been proven beyond reasonable doubt. So where you don't give me with the evidence, I won't support you. Where we had evidence, we won't have a choice. If we have evidence, we won't have a choice other than to submit to superior argument. So we didn't blackmail you. What we only told you was be sure of your facts so that you don't incur the wrath of innocent members of us.
Thank you very much.
Finally, sir.
Okay, sir.
To talk about Agua, I hope I'm correct if I say obrigado. Now, I want to thank you for your insightful contribution. You have actually amplified Professor Olode's position about the ideological pathway for funding education. Education is a tool for liberation, but it can also be used as a tool for suppression. So it depends on the way political elites, manipulates it. Like Julius Nyerere was doing in Tanzania. He came up with his philosophy of villagization, Ujamaa policy, and he was using education to drive what he called African socialism. In that context, education as a tool for redressing a history of injustice, as a tool for empowering its people economically, as well as politically, so that they could contribute towards building a nation that will stand on its feet. And that is why in Tanzania today, even though we call Tanzania a debt of resources, they have thrown up leaders like the immediate past leader who demonstrated selflessness, who demonstrated commitment to the good of the majority of his people. I think that is the way to go. If we get our education right, many of the crises we are confronting in Nigeria today, we can handle within the context and framework of our educational policies and procedures. I believe Nigeria has a lot of promise in that respect, but it appears our political elites are not getting it right. They are not getting it right for now. I hope someday, somewhere, I come back to do the rightful thinking about education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It remains for me to make my closing statements, and I will do so by saying that this has been an interview for 4 hours, and you could notice that his voice is already trying to say it's tired. This may be one of the best public documents that he as president and ASUU will be leaving. We immediately send out this document. In the next 1 hour, this entire proceeding will become public. We'll release it immediately, and hopefully it will generate more conversation, reports, PDTCs, and others. The immediate viewership we already have. We've recorded 5,200 viewers immediately. So that's going to grow multiple times as people watch the proceeding. We recorded 4,800 on Facebook, and then Zoom and YouTube, we recorded 432. So the total viewership is a large number of 5,200. And that number continues to grow as people access the recording. I would like to express the gratitude to our team, technical people, Shegun Olopade, Obina Kara, and others. It's a lot of work. I want to thank our partners, Tunde Kelani, Alaroye, and other partners who have their own viewership that are separate, and others who also sign in, whose numbers I do not know at this time. I'm very grateful to the interviewers, Daniel Woro, Tosin Alagbe, Professor Popola, Professor Tunde Babawale. We are very grateful to all of you. Next Sunday, we are going to have Alhaji Abdurrahman Ahmad, who is the head of the Ansarudin, the mission of Ansarudin. We are going to talk about Islam and society, Islam and politics, hijab, Western education, so many issues that we are going to talk about. As with other things, I am going to immediately begin to write reports on this interview, focusing on the takeaway. And some of these takeaway issues are very clear. Issues around the strike action, which is not resolved. Issues around ethics and corruption, which dominates the conversation. Issues around school fees, issues around transformation, and other issues. Hopefully, members of the public will join us in this conversation. And hopefully, those of you who have listened have been able to be part of the ASUU position on several of these issues. My final gratitude goes to the president of ASUU, Professor Biodun Ogunyemi, for agreeing to honor this invitation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye now, everyone. Take care. Take care.